Hi, everyone. As we mentioned at the beginning of the episode, we recorded episode 46 on Sunday afternoon before SummerSlam Night 2 aired. We did not know that Brock Lesnar would be brought back until after we had completed our recording. If we had known, our reactions to Night 1 would likely have been much different, and we may not have covered SummerSlam in the same way, or honestly, at all. We debated scrapping the first hour of this episode, as well as attempting to replace it with additional audio, but unfortunately, work commitments made this impossible. We also think that our discussions on the WWE audience and ethical consumption in general that we have in this episode are relevant to the situation. We fully understand that you may wish to skip this section of the podcast completely, and as always, we have provided the timestamps to make sure that you can. In our next episode, we will discuss the return of Brock Lesnar to WWE in depth, including the media coverage surrounding it and WWE's cowardly decision to end their press conferences so they can avoid anyone challenging them on this or any other topic. We will also be reviewing how we cover WWE's on-screen content going forward. Please feel free to reach out to us with any questions or comments, and as always, thank you for listening. Welcome to the Trish and Sarah Wrestling Podcast. I'm Sarah.
I'm Trish.
And this is our podcast. We talk about wrestling news and various topics from different promotions, primarily AEW, but also New Japan Pro Wrestling, WWE, and topics from around the wrestling world. Whatever we find interesting, and we hope you will too. We are a proud member of the Social Suplex Podcast Network, and you can find our content on our podcast feed, the Social Suplex Podcast feed, as well as on Twitter, Blue Sky, and YouTube. Please feel free to like, subscribe, and rate our podcast. We also have a store at Chopped Tees, so if you'd like to support us or just own some really cool merchandise, please take a look at chopped-tees/Social Suplex Network. And we are also happy to announce the Social Suplex newsletter, which is published every other week and available at socialsuplex.com and contains features, news, looks at different promotions around the world, and is extremely in-depth and very good. And I highly recommend it. So please feel free to check it out. When is the next issue going live, Trish?
Before this podcast goes live.
Okay, so there will be a brand new issue for you to go check out. Because it is Sunday, August 3rd, 2025, and Trish and I are going to talk about Night 1 of WWE's SummerSlam, which happened last night, Saturday, August 2nd. We have not seen Night 2 because, well, it has not happened yet, so I'm sure there's a lot to discuss about John Cena and some whatever crazed nutso thing, or nothing that actually interesting happened in the main event of that show. Whatever it is, we'll discuss it next time. Tonight we're going to cover Night 1, which was, we both watched it, and it was quite boring. Really a nothing boring show with an absolutely terrible main event and capped off with a extremely predictable and obvious cash-in, despite the supposed injury to Seth Rollins' already bedraggled knee, I guess we will say. So, Trish, did you think this was good or interesting, or were you, like me, bored to tears?
Oh, are we talking about the whole show, just the main event?
Just do a quick look at the whole show.
Oh, okay. There was quite a few things that I kind of noticed, but I didn't find anything that really kind of got you kind of engrossed. And I thought about the main event for a bit afterwards, because I thought, if you were really invested in CM Punk winning this belt, would you have found that a more interesting main event? Would you have been in kind of like in awe of the struggle, which actually was more Gunther having to cover for several rest periods, at one point saving him out the ring, turning sharpshooters over for himself. But would you feel that way? And I thought, maybe. But then I looked at the crowd, and I always think the crowd's quite an interesting thing. And you can look at the noise of the show, and there wasn't very much. And you can say, is it a mic thing? Is it not? But when you watch the main event, what I found really interesting was, and you watch the finish, where CM Punk struggles to get his knee up into Gunther's face for the GTS twice, or even near. I mean, we know what to deal with. Is that there isn't this huge outpouring. And I thought was really interesting was I thought there was a much bigger kind of motion from the crowd. Like, even if you just watch the crowd, even if you don't listen to them, but I think you can hear the sound difference as well for Seth Rollins coming out.
Oh yeah.
And then even bigger for the Seth Rollins cash-in. And this made me think about a lot of things. So, first of all, this is all about the moment, right? So, it gives them a moment to take away. And we live in this culture where moments are the most important thing, it feels like sometimes, with the way that we take content from like a TikTok or YouTube or Instagram or anything like that. But is the moment more important in wrestling than something long term that can create kind of loyalty and impact? Have we moved on, like, in general in entertainment to this moment culture? Or do we see something different? Because you can look at moment culture, you can look at one-hit wonders and things like trends and things that go viral. But then again, I can look at entertainment, I can look at something like Taylor Swift, selling out all these buildings. That's not based on a moment, right? That's based on some sort of thing where everyone buys into that. It's become a pop culture thing. But it's like, people have that loyalty. That's where you have all the Swifties and that sort of thing. So in wrestling, I come away with, this is the main heel, right, in WWE now. This is the Seth Riders. This is going to be the heel that everybody chases. And his title win against this babyface, winning a title in WWE for the first time in over a decade, supposed to be the big moment for this character, being that we built it up for how long? His first win back there, that sort of thing. And you take that story of that moment and you rip that up for this cash-in. And then you also rip the story up of Seth saying he'll never be champion, and maybe they'll find a way around that on Raw and say, I wanted you to do it, and then feel it taken away or whatever. But you take both of those moments, which should be big things that you then turn into business, and you give it up for this rush of sugar, rush of blood, we're just doing this, and bang, you've got a moment, but you don't get anything out of the long term on that. How beneficial do you actually think that is? Am I just losing my mind? Is this now the future? Is this what we do now? Like, is there no emotional payoff that actually matters anymore, and we just want the sugar rush?
I watched this freaking show this morning, and I was just almost like depressed afterwards because it's so bad. Like, WWE in general, like, I don't watch WWE because I don't enjoy the product and I don't want to spend my time watching something I don't like. But for different times like this, or for was it Clash of the Castle, I watched it, and I watched the Saudi main event because we wanted to sort of work on that to discuss. Like, this was the thing, like, okay, let me watch this, let me reassess, right? There were definitely some things about the show that, like, I was like, oh, that's actually better than I thought it was going to be, or this person was better than I thought they were going to be, or yada, yada, yada. But overall, I was kind of struck by how hollow everything felt, and how pointless everything felt, and how meaningless. Now, some of this may be my own fault because, like, I don't watch the product, so I'm not invested in the storylines the way someone who's there every day would be. But I'm also like, what is the storyline here, right? Like, Punk won the championship from Gunther. They didn't seem to have any kind of significant feud about it. It's not like he won from someone like Cena that he has a history or a relationship with. And then Seth showed up and beat him, like, really fast. And
9 seconds. Yeah.
9 seconds! He beat the shit out of him with the Money in the Bank briefcase, and then one curve stop, and that was it. And, like, people were crazy for it. They cheered the hell out of it. Mm-hmm. Which was the other thing I noticed watching this, is that people just didn't seem to really care that much about the heels and the faces, with the exception of Logan Paul and Jelly Roll, oddly enough, who seemed to really get the audience going. The face heel stuff didn't really seem to matter to anybody else. But I don't know, like, it just, I feel like the moment for this was, like, so tortured, and like what was the point of Seth faking an injury? Was he trying to throw Punk off his game? Like, how was doing this with a fake injury any different than if he had not had a fake injury and done it? Like, it meant there was no meaning other than that moment of him, like, throwing the crutches away, and what, like okay, so, like, it didn't, like, what did that mean, and what was the point of it narratively? Like, it didn't seem to be anything. So, like, that part I'm just kind of, and yet there are people going absolutely fucking berserk about it. But first of all, there were people glazing this match, which, like, this is one of the worst fucking matches I've ever seen since the last CM Punk match that I've ever seen. And we can get into that in a minute. Mm-hmm. But, like, beyond that, then you had people being like, oh my God, it's so incredible. This storytelling is unbelievable. Like, what storytelling? What was the story being told here? Rollins hates Punk? We've known that for this feud has been going on for 2 fucking years at this point. What is new about it? Like, I don't get it.
I just don't get from the... So I think you've scuppered 2 stories that you had long term that you could have told, just to do this. Right. The injury thing, the thing that gets me most about that. So, yeah, the injury thing, one, you worked your own locker room. Well done. That always goes well. That's 2 companies this year that want to do that. Both of them now have trust issues about other things. Right? Yeah, okay. So you think you stole some like news headlines away from AEW? Yeah, but then you gave away your SummerSlam main event. Does that matter? Maybe not. I don't know. But pretty much everyone knew you were there. You made a mockery of one of your key like media partners in PW Insider that looked like fucking jokes. You know, that's on them as well in terms of you were warned. You know, John Pollock put the word out there, and you can either take it or you can leave it. But as a babyface, like, you look at CM Punk, right? So Rollins throws them crutches down, right? Yeah. And he just stands there and he waits. Yep. And then he just gets beat the shit out of.
Well, he had to. He was so blown up, he couldn't do anything.
Well, but it's just like, so you look a fucking idiot. And then the world title, this is what I hate about Money in the Bank. And it's the same reason why I hate the concept when it's in AEW as well. And I'm glad that the Athena one is now cashed in for Forbidden Door. And the Max one shouldn't, you know, do anything significant either. It's because what you do is you make that world title, and yes, okay, it's a Mickey Mouse title, right? It's not the actual world title in W. But you make it completely secondary to this fucking briefcase, right? So you then have a reign, so you've earned this title in this match with Gunther, and then it means jack shit. It means jack shit and it's over. So this moment of CM Punk getting back and winning a world title means jack shit. Because it's just part of this moment with the briefcase. Because what matters is the fucking briefcase. And it was the same when Seth won it last year at WrestleMania. And lost it to Drew McIntyre just like that. Exactly the same thing. So you've then weakened your whole world title because your world title is now a prop that's secondary to a fucking briefcase. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. And, you know, maybe for WWE who kind of rely on moments and you would kind of think about that and you get that short-term rush. But in the long term, like, the prestige of that, this is no prestige of that title, who am I kidding? But you're like, no. You won't have any because you don't build it up to be like that. And then people say, oh, why isn't this person a draw with this or why isn't this person a draw with that? Because they have a belt. Well, the belt don't mean fucking anything. This is why we have the whole thing that we do at the moment. It's like, the belt doesn't mean anything. Like, you know, Cena having that belt or not having the other belt doesn't mean anything. They're coming for John Cena. And that's where we're at because you're devaluing something. And I think it's quite an interesting thing to do and to go back to when you had all those years of Roman with the belt and and there was all the talk of how they've kind of, solidified kind of the belt meaning something again. And then we're back to the same old shit again or the other belt. And it's just like, I just don't like the concept. I think that if they were going to do the cash-in, what they should have done is the same thing they did with the first one, because Michael Cole was throwing out his Roost of the Century or the language he was using back at WrestleMania 31. And you have Seth join the match and win it that way. And then you can keep your storyline with CM Punk. Because I don't even think you can guarantee that CM Punk's going to win that belt off Seth Rollins, which if you're going to do a moment like this, ultimately he has to be the chaser, right? You have to have him as the chaser. Sure. Like, he has to be the chaser that wins because that's the guy that you've made look like an absolute fucking clown. But when I look at other people that are involved in this, and I look at the Sami Zayn thing they're running, where they keep saying, his one goal is to be the world champion. And you think, is he going to beat Cody for the other belt? I don't see that, so that leaves Rollins. And then you look at Roman Reigns, and then obviously he's involved in this faction program. I'm sure they're setting up a big Survivor Series 5-on-5 for San Diego. And I'm sure that's where they're going. But he's involved in this as well. If you have the option of which one you're going to run Rollins and Seth in front of Punk and Seth. So I just think it's a failed concept that gets a little sugar rush, and maybe you get a few headlines, and maybe that's all that matters in this day and age. I don't know. And I'm kind of dooming about that in my head because I'm just like, this shouldn't be what it is. But the idea of giving that moment to your big top heel and like making your babyface look like a complete and utter fucking clown is just not. I just don't see the value in it, and I think it's interesting that they've gone back down that route again, even though everybody knew it was coming.
I don't get it, but like, to me, watching this and like seeing all the shit around it, it just felt to me more of the depressing. Like, it felt like a corollary to like the depressing state of like politics and shit in our country, which is like, no matter how much garbage and bullshit gets pulled out and performed and done, there's a state media happy to go along with us and tell us this is the best thing ever and this is a great decision and this is super smart and Trump's a wonderful leader. And I feel the same way about WWE. There's an entire media ecosystem of people prepared to tell us how this is great and this is awesome and this is smart and this is terrific and what a fantastic. You saw it last night. Your tweets from people being like, what a great cash-in. Like, no, it wasn't. Like, do you believe this, or you're just happy to repeat what this is said? And as long as that happens, part of me is like, this shit's always going to continue, because there's always somebody who's going to be like, well, so-and-so said it was a phenomenal moment, so it's a fantastic, SummerSlam moment. And they'll replay it and bullshit like that.
But they're going to look at it and think it was, in terms of how it was done, like the crowd reaction, they're going to see that and think, yeah, it was a great moment. But moments are fleeting, and moments don't, can do far more damage than you think. How many great moments can you think of that end up doing long-term damage? There's plenty of them.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't look at it and go, oh, yeah, it was a great cash-in, like, because it's like, but this is a heel cashing in on a babyface that probably won't get it back, and you've taken that moment away that should have been, like, really important to that character, and it's worthless, and you made the belt worth less. I don't see it. I'm probably never going to see it with Money in the Bank. I don't think it has any great benefit. It's the same at the last one. They did it at the Evolution pay-per-view when they had Naomi cash in. Yeah. So, you're originally going to do that on Jade Cargill. We'll talk about Jade in a bit. But you cash in after that. I've seen it now, that excellent Rhea Ripley and Sky match. And it's like, you had a great ending. You told a great story in your main event. That main event's now completely fucking worthless. Yeah. Like, it's just, I don't like the concept. I just think it's so cheap, and it doesn't benefit anyone in the longer term, but it relates me back to, for me, more to their kind of 2010s booking, and how that kind of sugar rush was way more important than like building anything for the long term, and they suffered for it. And I keep looking, the big thing with them is that I look at, they have the kind of Cena to fall back on for a bit longer. And yes. I've been looking at some of the numbers, we'll talk about this more in a couple of weeks, but I've been talking at some of the numbers with Cena and no Cena, and I think, have you got enough come January, when you lose that kind of, that rush of everyone going to Cena for the last time, which we're going to see very much in the fall, and that's going to carry their figures through the fall. It's been carrying their figures for most of the year already. Combined with, I do think they have a live push for Raw for Netflix as well. But what have you got after that? What is it? Are people just going to keep coming out to doing the yeet thing, or are they actually going to keep coming out for your characters? What have you got? You always need something new, something going to grow. Is this chasing the Seth Riders thing going to be the story? Is that going to hold enough? Is that going to hold the interest for football season? Is that going to hold the interest into WrestleMania? What is there for Cody? Whatever comes out of this thing tonight, I'm very interested in what they do, because at the moment it feels very Rock Cena 2. I don't think it's going to be massively beneficial for either of them, but we'll see. But it's that thing where I just look at, and I'm always thinking, I'm one of these people, I always think 3, 4, 5 months ahead, and I look at it and I think, what have you got underneath? Because I don't know what you have got. And I don't see anything that looks to me like it will be able to maintain at this level. And you're not going to be able to replicate John Cena. John Cena is, and The Rock, the last two people that come in and have major business impact every time. But you have to be doing something. Because it's, they made a good decision in a way of trying to book so many of these shows in different cities and get these site fees now, because you want to do that now, because I don't know what position you're going to be in a year to do the same thing. So you're trying to bank as much as you can, but that's sensible business, do that while you're on top. But I don't know.
This is part of what so two sides of this, right? There are two conversations that kind of hark back to this. One of them was after, when we were at All In and we heard about the injury to Seth, and before anything come out about it being a work and people thinking that it was real, the conversations that I was having was, who do they have if Seth is really hurt? Like, how do they save this angle? Who else is there to help step in and do something with this? And I think people were really racking their brains to try and think of who could step up and lead this if he was really out. And the second piece is, again, going back to some conversations about what could possibly happen tonight with Cena and Cody. If Cody turns heel tonight, who do they have as a babyface to, chase him, right? It doesn't seem like there really is anybody. And especially not anybody young. Like, a lot of them are doing the same. We're dealing with a lot of same 40. I think there was a conversation today about who's on the show that's under 40 in their top event. And somebody was like, the Usos are 39. And I was like, Jesus Christ.
But you can hear it in the reactions to everybody else. There's a real lack of depth. Yeah. You can hear that in the reaction for the rest of the show, where it's pretty, I didn't think it was, you could see, I always look for the motion as well, because when you look at miking, you always look at motion, and there wasn't any. So you think there isn't a huge amount of depth there, and they'll get by for the moment for these plug in the gaps, but we see how this ends up. We know how this ends up. We know how it ends up stagnating as well. So in that terms, what have they got for the end of the year, I think is quite a viable question. The other thing about that as well is, I get that they're telling. So the way that Wade Barrett said it is they're telling a story about Roman Reigns in terms of like, oh, he's protecting someone for the first time and just something like that. But Roman, since his coming back last year, I think that's such a fascinating story for the end of the year in terms of where he ends up. Because I think we thought that would be a big impact. You know, we're waiting for that big babyface run. It's the same way we talk about Kenny Omega, isn't it, in AEW, his big babyface run. And I really don't think we've seen anything close to that or anything sort of impactful. He's just kind of there. And it's a really strange feeling to think, like, that's probably one of the quickest layups they have, and I don't see it. Yeah. But the Punk Gunther match itself I thought was quite interesting because...
Interesting or shit?
See, I use interesting in a lot of ways in work, and I'm using the same... I'm applying this in the same way here. But I thought Gunther worked really, really hard. And there were times where, you know, it reminded me of, actually. It reminded me of, do you remember I mentioned the Gabe Kidd Tanahashi match at New Japan Seoul in Tokyo Budokan? And there was a period of time in the middle of that match where Gabe basically, like, stops and he's, like, cutting a promo mid-ring sort of thing to try and give Tanahashi a gap. And then he's, like, you know, he's gesturing to the crowd. And they did exactly the same thing here. So, like, Gunther has to stop, like, numerous times and be like... Oh, yeah. Like... And there's times where, I think there's one moment actually where he goes to, he stands up thinking they're going to do this next sequence, and then Punk just can't get up and he just kind of fades into the corner. There's even better bit where like Punk's hanging on outside the ring for a chop and it actually was going to fall out and Gunther grabs his leg. And Wade Barrett covers none of it because he's basically like, no, he wasn't trying to get out. He nearly fell. Like, in fact, Wade Barrett did nothing to cover for them. At one point he's just like, oh, you know, they're both blown up and it's like... Oh, he's like, the both men are moving so sluggishly. He just kind of, he gave them nothing. He was just like, yeah, I'm going to try and cover him, but I'm not really. I'm going to admit that you've got absolutely nothing. And there's a bulldog. There's a bulldog that was like Tanahashi. Oh, like, yeah. He went down on one knee. But it was painful like watching Tanahashi, like it is currently, without the kind of charm that Tanahashi has. But yeah, that's what it felt like. It's like it was just watching a guy like not be able to do very much at all, and someone else very gingerly trying to take care of them instead of actually calling it.
So many rest breaks and so many moments where Punk just laid down on the mat face down and talked to the referee, and then referee talked to Gunther, and then he talked to the referee, and the referee talked to Gunther, and he laid down some more, and hey, let's do a rest hold, and it was again similar to the Cena match where it was like, here's 4 or 5 minutes of action, but hey, here's another rest hold, and Punk's got to lay down some more, and let's talk to the referee a little bit, and what's going, like, it was so... I said this, like, this is the kind of match that shows you that wrestling is fake. Like, I watch this match and I'm like, oh, wrestling's fake. More than anything, any flip, any fucking sequence, any Osprey, whatever, this is what says wrestling is fake because it's so clearly choreographed and the guy is so clearly dying. Like, Punk was dying out there. He almost didn't deserve to be out there. And the worst part is the announcers at the beginning basically selling Punk is the best of the world. I'm pretty sure that Michael Cole said Punk is the best of the world in his prime. Best in the world today in his prime. Yeah. Can Gunther beat him? This will be such a challenge for Gunther. And then you watch the match and Punk can barely fucking do the most simplest sequence, and you're like, how embarrassing to be Gunther and to be out there having to try and carry this guy to a 2-star match, which he couldn't even fucking do. Nobody could. No harsh on Gunther. But like, and I don't feel like Gunther's the kind of heel that should be screaming things to Punk in the middle of the ring to try and give him that break and doing those mid-match monologues and having those conversations. Like, it just didn't seem like it gelled to me.
Well, the idea is Gunther is like high intensity, right? And they tried to sell that, but then he had to keep kind of stopping himself. And then it looks really bad when, like, there's a failed triangle choke or he's having to turn a sharpshooter on himself.
Oh, my God. It was
or
so
anything
bad.
like that. But I thought he worked so hard. It was like, I just felt like he was going, fuck's sake, I'll do it my fucking self for most of it, you know?
It just was one of those things where I'm just like, what's the, like... I don't know. It just, like, some of these fucking old guys just go home. Like, retire. Like, if you can't perform at the level that you are deserved, like, he's in the fucking main event of night one, all right? And whatever I think of the whole night one, buy one, 2-1 bullshit, there's probably a bunch of guys in the back who'd kill to be in that main event. And the fucking guy can't do the least amount of wrestling holds without having to stop and lay on the ground for a while, without looking like he's literally about to die. At the end of that match, his body is bright red, but his face is chalk white, and he looks like he's gonna start puking because he's so fucking blown up. And I'm like, why are you trying to do this? Go be a fucking announcer. Go be a fucking manager. Go the fuck home. Okay? And it's not just WWE, because let's face it, there's too many of these fucking old guys hanging around trying to do this shit. We saw it with Edge this year, Adam Copeland, where he's trying to do fucking matches that he can't fucking do because he's got so much ego wrapped up in like, well, I've got to be one of the best wrestlers in the world. Like, you're fucking not. The young guys are lapping you. Get out of the fucking way. And if you still want to be involved in wrestling, do it, but like, don't do it like this. Don't make these young guys look like shit, because it's selfish and it's bullshit and it doesn't help the product. And it doesn't help anything that was going on there. Like, what an absolute shit show of a match. And I don't want to hear any of this, oh, Punk was selling how hard it was to beat Gunther. No, he wasn't. I didn't believe that for a fucking second. The guy looked like he was about to die the entire fucking time. For the most, like, literally, he did like fucking 2 minutes of chops and punches and had to lay down for half an hour. That's how bad it was. Like, I could have had as a match like this. Like, what are you doing? And I feel for the guy, because he's clearly, and again, allegedly gotten the hair plugs, allegedly naturally gotten himself in shape, allegedly gotten the Botox, which you can kind of see in some spots, and he still looks old, and he still looks like shit, and he still moves for garbage. And it's like, nobody is looking at that thinking, my God, this man is the best wrestler in the world. He looks fucking old and like he needs to go home and take a nap. Like, have some cookies, put on Judge Judy, and like relax for the afternoon in the recliner, okay? Because what this is not fucking cutting it. I'm sorry, it's bullshit. And it's fun for us because we get to talk about it and laugh at it. But like, this, at least Cena's fucking retiring. At least Tanahashi's like, I'm done, right? Like, what are these fucking... Punk's gonna be out there in another fucking main event trying to get this title, being like, I'm the best in the world. No, you're fucking not! Jesus Christ with these fucking old guys.
Hey, Sarah, what lasted longer in MetLife Stadium? CM Punk's title run or Aaron Rodgers' career?
That's a good one, Trish. I enjoyed that. Oh, Aaron Rodgers.
I just thought it was a nice ending to your thing there. There's some similarities there, right?
There are. It's more fucking old guys who need to go home. Jesus Christ.
Do you know,
look alike too, which is fucked up.
Yeah, it's a good comparison in lots of different ways, actually. But what I thought was quite interesting as well was, I've used the word interesting again because I'm using it for my naming, is I think some of the people that will like this, and someone pointed this out to me earlier, and I thought it was a pretty apt point, is that they were attempting to do sort of an early Ring of Honor match. And it will appeal to those sorts of kind of people that are really into that stuff, or into the Timothy Thatchers of the world, I'm sure. But yeah, you can't tell me that this was selling this beating, and you take 29 minutes and then all of a sudden he's got blood on his face, and they pretended that it blood from a nose and it came from the forehead, which was
such bullshit.
Which was incredibly funny. And then he can't get him up for 2 GTSs, and
he can't get him up. And that's the other thing, like, he's got to change his finisher. He can't fucking get these guys up, and once he's got him up there, he doesn't fucking know what to do with them.
He could get his knee high up.
He can't get his knee up. Like,
and I think that's part of the reason why the crowd just kind of went, yeah. But it was very funny because they cut to like two things in the crowd. They cut to this family that just looked like, what? And they cut to this guy in a blue shirt who was like, boo, and he's fucked down. And I pissed myself. I was like, is that the only 2 shots you can find? Now, come on now.
I got the big CM Punk puts me to sleep sign, which I enjoyed seeing. That was funny. Well, I think, look, the other thing about this match was sort of the ridiculous structure of it, which is that, and I think it might have been different if Punk could have actually done some of the moves or done some of this stuff, but because he looked so blown up and so bad, and because it was so obvious that Gunther was carrying him, the fact that they do this weird table spot where Punk pulls Gunther's leg and has Gunther goes face down on the Spanish announce table. And then you can see him crawling under the table to either gig or use fake blood. I couldn't figure out which one it was. I'm sure people will argue for both. And then he comes back out and he's like, he literally, you almost thought that someone in the audience had stabbed him because there was no reason why he was selling the way he was for falling down and hitting his head on the announce table. And I get the arguments that people have made about like, oh, Gunther, like seeing the blood, recognized that he was mortal. And I'm like, like, give me a fucking break. This isn't some kind of monster from like a fucking fairy tale. Like, you know, it was just kind of bullshit. And then, like I said, he stumbles to the ring. Punk is still taking a really long break because he had to stand up and pull Gunther's leg. So that was like, you know, he needs to take a break from that one. And so Punk jumps up, puts him in the 2 GTSs, and then that's the finish, right? The other part that killed me during this match was the number of times that Punk was laying in the middle of the fucking ring, and Gunther didn't even try to cover him. He just either stopped around or started yelling, "Ooh, I'm better than you. I'm the best in the world." Like, what the fuck? Cover the fucking guy. This is what I say when I'm talking about, like, the suspension of disbelief, and people are going on about, like,
he couldn't. That's the thing. He couldn't, because he couldn't, like, the kick out is too much energy. Like, they're trying to save the fucking guy. Like...
You're not fucking wrong.
That's it. That's it. Like,
God, it was so bad. I don't trust anyone who's like, that was a good match. I'm like, you need to have your eyes checked. What the fuck is going on? Or you need to get the CM Punk delusion syndrome done.
Yeah, the crowd sat there in silence for most of it. They were just pretend.
People were like, yeah, you won. And then Seth Rollins' music hit and everybody in the freaking audience went absolutely fucking berserk insane.
Well... We've missed the important question around Seth Rollins.
Yeah.
Yeah. So last time we saw Seth Rollins on a WWE pay-per-view, you said he was serving?
Yes, I did. He served some cunt that time. He served nothing this time. Nothing was served. He didn't like... I had high hopes for the way he threw away the crutches. I was bored to tears by it. I appreciated the boots and the pants. I was more interested in the pants when the knee brace made it look like he had some kind of frilly thing going on at the ankle, but it turned out that was just the way the knee brace interacted with the cut of the ankle, and then it was a bummer. I appreciated that they were high-waisted. I liked that they were the tuxedo pant, but he got rid of the jacket, which was the most interesting thing about the outfit. And I know you liked the necklace, but I was not a fan.
I didn't like the necklace. I just thought you'd like the necklace.
No. I didn't like the necklace. I thought the necklace was like it made him look like he was a Superman like cosplayer. It was just like in some weird alternate dimension or some other bullshit. I didn't care for it. I did think it was funny the way they all sat down. Paul Heyman is the world's worst overactor. Whenever I see him and then I hear people talk about like, oh my God, Paul Heyman's incredible. He does this unbelievable cinema. I'm like, what? Are we watching the same person whose like jowls are trembling with these sneakers wrapped around his neck and he's cowering in fear from Roman Reigns' giant white teeth? Like, what the fuck is going on there? I don't know. Whatever. I'm gonna.
Do you not think he's like a proper clout goblin? Like, he has to be involved in every shot. So like, Rollins sits down, so he has to sit down, and then Rollins is still with a thing, so he wraps himself around him like a bad scene from the Titanic, and it's like
he makes MVP look like Christopher Daniels. Like, Jesus Christ. He's a clout demon of clout demons.
Let's not get into MVP conversations this week.
Oh,
we'll save that one.
Sorry. Shit, that's got to be another episode. That's got to be another 3 episodes. We're leaving that alone.
We'll wait till we hear a bit more on that one. I've sent some sniffer dogs on that too.
Of course you fucking did. No, Well, all right. Do you have anything else to say about this main event? Because I feel like there's other things in this show that we could touch on briefly.
Nothing else on the main event.
It's ridiculous. Like I don't want to. Like, I don't know. Whatever. You think Punk is good? Good for you. I'm sorry that you have to be, a fan of this shitty wrestler. But whatever. Go on with your lives. Enjoy your moment. He got to cry. He looked like shit. Blah blah blah. I'm sure it was just character based. Whatever. So let's see what else we had with the show. The show opened with Roman and Jey Uso against Bronson Reed and Braun Breaker. I was kind of fascinated by this because I hadn't seen Braun Breaker do a match in a very long time, and I was more impressed with him than I think anybody else on this, with the exception of Jelly Roll, or as the kids call it, Jelly Roll.
What is the problem with that? Seriously. What is your
Jelly
problem?
Roll? It just sounds weird. Just Jelly Roll. Oh, Jelly Roll.
Jelly roll's something you eat.
I know. Maybe it's because I'm thinking of a jelly donut, and I would never say jelly donut. I would say jelly donut. I don't know. I'm overthinking this now. Whatever. I thought Breaker's but then I had a moment where I checked myself and I was like, do I think that Breaker is actually good, or is he just good in a WWE system? And because this is a WWE match, he looks good. I thought this tag match was fairly decent. Yeah. It was the kind of thing that if you put it on like Dynamite, I'd absolutely watch this as like a party tag match. I didn't think it was terrible. I didn't like the part where they stopped the match to replay Jey Uso's entrance music.
See, that was interesting because I thought that was the one thing the crowd got up for in the entire match.
Yes,
I actually thought
they
the work
didn't care
was
about
good,
the rest of it.
and I actually
No.
thought the finish, when they got to the finish and the crowd realised after
that was done.
that it was done, and they realised Jay was getting the pin so they could do the yeet again, was the most excited they got. I don't think they were that. I kept trying to work out, are they excited for them winning? Because obviously it was pretty obvious at the point he was going, or were they just obvious because they were like, yeah, we're going to yeet?
I don't know. It was a weird crowd in that way where I thought, I know you said that you felt the crowd was essentially the same loudness all night. I disagree with that slightly because I think the Jelly Roll Logan Paul tag match was the loudest the crowd was to me in terms of the whole show, in terms of like consistently throughout the entire show. But I also know from when we were there that like sometimes the crowd's just not mic'd properly. So I don't want to claim that the people weren't cheering. But again, it does seem like the WWE crowds don't really give a shit about the matches as much as they care about the entrances and the shit going on, like cash-ins and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So
they enjoyed their yeeting mid-match, but I did think it was a decent match.
Yeah, it was fine.
Roman looks a lot more lean than I've seen him in a while as well. He
does, but his Superman punch is awful. He did it like 4 times, and I was like, what? I couldn't figure out what was happening, and then I was like, wait, is that his Superman punch? Like, you want to talk about not crisp. He just sort of, his arm sort of vaguely made a motion in the direction of somebody's face, and I was like, wait, that's what that is? God damn.
He nearly killed him. Good. He nearly killed himself on that fucking dive over the top as well, and I think that's
he missed by so much.
Probably dropping a bit of weight is probably part of that as well, like you forget how far you're going to go. And like he just goes careening, and you can see his arms go up, going, "Oh shit!"
He went, "Oh shit!" I gotta land on my. He flipped his whole body over to land on his back because he was like, "Crap, I missed him."
He was so close on his head, but no, it was a decent tag match, and I think Breakker. The thing is, I always think about it. So you said like, is he good or is he good in the WWE system? But I think you have to look at, is he good within that WWE system match? And yeah, so I always look at it like that. Like I can't judge him compared to if he was working a New Japan ring or if he was working an AEW ring. Could you judge him on how they were asked to work and kind of that style? And to me, it was like, yeah, okay, he fits. You know, they did well. It was probably the right. Bronson Reed's very good in general, so that helps. You know, put everything together. And you know, Roman can show when he chooses to move around can be good, and you can get away with then carrying Jey Uso then. I think Breakker got hurt during that match as well. So I think that's the biggest thing. It's the biggest thing with him, I think, is they have huge hopes for him. But one of the biggest things is that he can't seem to stay healthy.
No.
He seems to struggle with that. But yeah, that was the best match on the show, I thought. Did you think the other tag match was better?
I didn't think it was better. They didn't really do anything in it. Like, it was a lot of standing around and emoting. Like, there was a lot of emoting in this match. Like that was another thing I noticed about all of these matches is that they seem to stop in the middle of them to give dialogue or to, like, share, like, this is what's happening right now. I'm going to tell you how I feel. And I was like, Jesus fucking Christ. Like, if you can't tell me that with your body language and, like, the story of the match itself, then you're failing at what wrestling is. But I don't know. WWE seems to have redefined wrestling. But all of that stuff made me question like the whole it's cinema shit that the fans go crazy for, but whatever. I hate when they do that in AEW. I fucking can't stand the mid-match monologues. Don't fucking do it here. Like, if you want to talk to each other and it's part of the story, that's fine, but you shouldn't like lower the crowd noise and turn up the microphone volume so I can hear some piece of dialogue that you're sharing with each other. But yeah, I thought this was fine. I agree with you that this was definitely the best in terms of put together match on the card. It moved quickly. It was aided by Breakker being in it because he's clearly like the fastest guy in WWE of at least the people that were on this card. And they seem to let him be fast as opposed to some other people that they don't seem to be fast. I agree with you. This was probably the best thing on the show.
It was a good, it was the right thing for an opener.
Yeah.
And did it get the response that you really want? No. You know, and anyone pretended anything else is a bit daft, but it's like, it's what it is. And I think the way they structured the tag matches in particular worked on both occasions. It worked here and it worked with the Jelly Roll thing. You know, I think they protected him well. He didn't look an idiot. They gave Logan Paul the win, which suggests to me that someone is coming out babyface at that main event on night 2. That feels like a bit of a setup to me. Unless you're going to are you doing Randy Orton? Oh, who the fuck knows? Who cares?
It was funny to hear people talk about Jelly Roll losing weight, because I was like, Jesus Christ, Orton's fucking, natural stomach looks larger than Jelly Roll's entire body. Like Orton is just so huge as to be not a real person anymore. His head is enormous. Like, he looks like that's the thing about this stuff. It's like the airport test and all this other stuff. A guy like Orton just looks like a freak. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he just doesn't look like a normal human being, and not in a good way.
This is just coming back to last time's Randy Orton debate, isn't it, really? And a ton of tour run. Nah, they do... Something they do well is, like, I have no time for all the celebrity stuff. I get it. It's the same with, like, the boom guy in AEW. I don't care, but I get it. But they do a good job. I don't fucking know. But they do a good job of how they incorporate them into matches and protecting them. And they've been doing that for a long time. Like, there's a, you can look at Bad Bunny. You can even look at Logan Paul if you want to. You can look back all the way back to when they first brought Ronda Rousey in with the match they did at WrestleMania on that one as well. So they are very, very good at that. That is something that, and whether that shouldn't be what carries your company, but they are good at that. The Jade Cargill, Tiffany Stratton thing was a mess. But an NXT structured mess. It was very much, this is our rehearsed match. This is what we're going to do. We're going to mess up quite a few spots. Jade is going to lose pretty clean, and that tells a story in itself. And I know Dave Meltzer spoke about, they had the idea of pushing Jade Cargill at the start of the year like they do Rhea Ripley, making her one of the two main stars, and that obviously looks like it's out the window. But you can't look at the reaction from the crowd, Jade Cargill, and the work that she's doing currently and think any other way other than, I would abandon it too. Yeah. And
well, the idea that, like, what was the other thing they said? The champion Tiffany has technical finesse. I was like, yeah, okay, sure. Like, is technical finesse, like, I don't know. It wasn't good. It was one of those things where it was clearly rehearsed. They couldn't figure out what to do if they made a mistake. It was just, like, this is what, and then you have to listen to the announcers talking about, like, well, this is the genius of the NIL program. Like, yeah, a bunch of wrestlers who can't actually wrestle.
You're selling that to someone else when you say that. You're not selling that to anyone else other than whatever partners you're doing. And they did a lot of that on this show, So what I found really interesting, and I always look for, like, little things that kind of spark my, what are you doing this for, is how they try to present themselves in, like, kind of all the other infomercial stuff and all that sort of thing. Everything's, like, linked into partners, brands. They'll do skits on, like, food things and pizza and whatever. But also, there's constant shots of, like, New Jersey for SummerSlam. Who paid them, when New Jersey paid them $7.1 million. And I kept thinking about, and then when they show other things, so like Clash in Paris, there's constant shots of Paris, there's constant shots, we look at anything they're doing with San Diego, with Survivor Series, and their local kind of tourism office is saying that's a key part of it. So you can see, like, this strategy has changed where it felt like the promoting to the local areas was actually more important than promoting to the fans in terms of everything else they did. And then obviously they brought politics into it as well. This apolitical company was showing Triple H at the White House this week, which I believe got booed in the arena, which you can make of it what you want, how the crowd feel, but they still pay. But what do you think in terms of how they presented themselves as a brand? Because I thought they're kind of moving far more into that UFC thing where they're being more open about their politics and their allegiance, and obviously they're not looking to have as much kind of what's the word, like, the cancelling of the press conferences as well, and some of the interviews that were given this week. They don't want as much kind of exposure as they did previously. They're not willing to have that risk at this point.
Excuse me. I think there are a lot of people who have tried to say, well, it's not that big of a deal that they're, doing stuff with the Trump administration, and it's not really that blah, 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 and they're not showing it on screen, and it's not part of their programming, and now it is. Now it's part of their programming. Now you're getting, propaganda from this administration scattered throughout your SmackDown programming, and I'm sure this won't be the last time it happens. I'm sure we'll see Triple H and Linda McMahon and Stephanie McMahon in various and sundrical different moments with this administration, and I'm sure their dream is to get Trump to come to one of these events, maybe a Mania, and they'll do it. And I think there were people for whom this was not something they want to participate in or agree with. But as somebody else said, you've got people in the audience booing Trump who paid $500 a ticket to be at this show. Like, what do you think you're doing, right? Like, the support's baked in. You can boo all you want to, but you fucking paid the money. For this, you paid the money for this. That's the part that continually blows my mind about WWE fans, and that's where I'm like, what the fuck is going on here? Like, nothing happened on the show. The wrestling wasn't good. It was chock full of commercials everywhere. Fucking Jelly Roll came out and said New York City, New Jersey. Like, that was the name of the town they were in. New York City, New Jersey. That doesn't exist, okay? The Meadowlands is in a fucking swamp in New Jersey where, like, you can kind of make out the Empire State Building from a distance, but it's not nearby.
Yeah.
It's not easy to get to. It's
No.
a miserable fucking section of the Jersey Turnpike to drive by. I have friends going there for a concert who were like, fuck, why did we buy these tickets? Because it fucking sucks to get there. Like, I don't know. I think people will continue it just like Sami Zayn and CM Punk will continue to lie to themselves that it doesn't matter, that they can continue to voice support for the, I'm going to go to a protest and it's fine that I work for this company. There will be people who will be fans of this and will consume this product and will say it's fine. I'm sure you and I could take criticism for watching the damn thing when we, but that people are just going to convince themselves that this is an okay thing to support, right? That it's, I'm supporting the wrestlers, I'm not supporting this stuff, and it's okay. And Triple H really, he just wants people to be healthy, right? Like, he just cares about kids. And, like, that's the kind of stuff where it's like, it's bullshit, but, like, the mask is off at least. There's no pretending anymore. Like, they're not even trying to hide it. So fine, right? Everybody knows. And you have to make your peace with how you're handling it and what you're doing when it comes to these programs. Like, and how you're engaging with it.
I mean, that leads to lots of kind of complicated thoughts around ethical consumption, right? And
it's a nightmare.
And you can do that with so many parts of your life as well.
Oh, fuck yes. So we're all on Twitter, Trish. It's,
Well, yeah.
It's the same thing.
I think there's a difference between, I try not to judge people's individual choices so much in terms of, fan base and that sort of thing. But I think there's a big difference between that and the way a brand presents itself. And a brand that said it's apolitical is obviously very much becoming tied on screen to a government and everything that comes with that. And that's an interesting thing to do. It can work for you, and then it can't. It'll switch around depending. But I find it more interesting that they are tying themselves to that brand than I do people's kind of individual choices, especially in the environment that we live in currently. Because I will not police them. That's everyone makes their individual decisions, but they are as a company making their decision to be more like the rest of TKO and associated with this government and bring that to their screen. So that's kind of the way I look at it. But I also thought that it was kind of interesting as well in terms of how they presented their coverage of Hogan, or their tributes to Hulk Hogan in the past couple of weeks. Who passed away.
Yes, Hulk Hogan died. My boss at work was like, "Oh, were you sad that Hulk Hogan died?" And I was like, "No." She was like, "Okay." Yeah, I think they had 3. What is that? With SummerSlam, it was 4 tributes to Hogan. I think we had 3 separate 10-bell salutes, and then video package last night.
Yeah.
I don't know. This is one of those things that I sort of struggle to care about because I do think that it's always challenging when you have historical figures. And I think you could argue that Hogan in many ways is a historical figure at this point. Like, at least in terms of entertainment history, that are complete pieces of shit, right? Because you have to then sort of discuss their pieces of shitness while also acknowledging their historical impact. Because the guy did have one, whether we want to acknowledge it or not. Now, do you want to talk about the real historical impact or the WWE sanitized version of his historical impact? Those are 2 separate conversations. And I feel like there were a lot of places that did a very good job the last couple of weeks covering Hogan and the whole, totality of who he was as a person and, his impact on wrestling and how that was managed. I feel like The Torch did a really good job of that.
Yep. I thought Post and The Observer did as well.
Post did a very good, yes. Yeah.
Newsletter
so there were places, there are places that really covered that stuff and did it very well. So, but I don't think anybody going into this expected that from WWE. Like, they're not going to give you honesty ever on any topic because they're so busy protecting themselves and protecting that brand and that image. Which is, like you said, sort of why it's interesting that they're going full, administration politics now, because that seems like you'd want to be a little protective of your brand in that way. And they're kind of like, no, it's fine now.
But they don't need to, because the media is slanted that way as well at the moment. It tends to move with the government. We have the same thing in the UK. Yeah. So you don't, and then when you look at the coverage of Hogan from outside of wrestling, you're not getting the same. So if you read, there was a live feed on the BBC, and we're reading it, and it's very much, yes, he had issues in later life, but here's how he made people feel, and here's what he did, and this is how he's historic, and these are all the tributes, and it's very much veiled in that way. So in that way, sometimes wrestling gains the advantage of not having some of these things covered, and WWE can then play on that image and use that when it comes to the mainstream media. And I think that's what we've kind of seen with this one. And it's the same thing when we talk about ethical consumption. When people think back, and you'll see some people who think about, this is how these things made me feel as a child, and they're connected to that character. But when wrestling makes it difficult, and especially with someone like Hulk Hogan, is what's the line between the character and the man?
Right.
And in this case, there's not very much in between them. And the actions of the man, reflects on that character. And it probably feels very much different. If you grew up in that 80s period and you were very much attached to the Hulk Hogan, you were a Hulkamania, maybe you look at this differently to someone with no attachment who basically knows him for being a racist.
Right, because he's not or an old guy who looked weird and did some weird commercial or was on WWE. Yeah.
Yeah, because this guy's one that's not wrestled since 2011. I think I actually saw his last match. That's quite weird, isn't it? It was TNA in Manchester. But this is... So they don't see that, and they just see what he has become publicly. And that doesn't mean he wasn't always that way. The last chance of this is he was. But that's what they see. So you've got these kind of different thought processes going on in people's mind, and then that's just kind of made worse by the kind of mainstream media coverage for people who aren't kind of, who don't watch wrestling anymore or grew up with this, that sort of thing, who just see, this is this iconic person dying, and that's how they treat it, and it drives us all insane when we hear the coverage because they're not actually thinking about everything else as well. This wasn't a guy that his answer to being caught out for being a racist was just like, don't get called on Twitter, like on social media, like you go, it's just... And I think that's where it's frustrating, because if you feel like that and you can see this and you think about, if we accept this, what else do we accept? And you're driven by that, and then you see all this other coverage, it just drives you insane. And it's really hard to kind of get your head around that. And then you see all these tributes, and they go out and they do the 10 bell salutes, and people try and justify it, and obviously... And it's really difficult. I think it's difficult for some of those WWE talent to go into interviews and be asked about it and give anything other opinion than what they're allowed to give as well. So I think people probably give people a hard time about that when they have a line to toe, and that's what it is. But yeah, it's difficult, and I just think that I get it. And they do the constant tributes and that sort of thing. And obviously, he's very much part of this kind of MAGA thing as well. So that'll become part of it when you're aligning yourself in that way. But it's one of those things where I look at the wrestling media coverage and I think actually a lot of people did a good job and have kind of done this fairly, and then it's hard to see outside. So yeah, I'm probably rambling a little bit now, but it's such a hard thing to kind of find a line on and kind of feel anything without having 10 sort of things where you're like, but that. And but yeah, they've pushed it very hard in the last couple of weeks, and I don't blame anyone else for what they've done either. So I don't think that anyone should look at what AEW did and have Tony Schiavone talk about, it's hard for someone to lose someone in your family, and have that be their only thing, and look down on that either. I know they got a lot of.
I thought that was
heat on it.
fine.
Yeah, I thought it was the right. It's someone that's never been associated with their company, that obviously they've had made very clear in the past that they want nothing to do with, and they gave a tribute in that kind of way. And it made, from a human perspective, if you will.
Yeah.
And I thought that was probably the right way for them to deal with it. No video, no kind of graphic or anything like that, but just he mentions it, brings it up. It's not played to a live audience. It's not done for a pop or for brand reasons. It's just
for cheers or boos.
Exactly, right? Yeah. So I thought, that was a pretty professional way for them to deal with that as well.
Yeah, I didn't have any issue with that. It feels like nitpicking to, if you're complaining about how AEW handled Hogan's death, then you're just looking for reasons to complain about AEW. I'm sorry. Like you said, he never fucking worked for them. Come on. I don't know. I think that stuff is stupid to get worked up about, but yeah, I get worked up enough about stupid stuff, so there you go.
Shall we move on from anything else for WWE? Are we done?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think the only thing I would say would be circling a little bit back to Jade Cargill is she was somebody in terms of coming into WWE from AEW had a huge buzz, and that's effectively with this seems like it's just died.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like, again, we've touched on this before, but it doesn't seem like there's a lot of people from the AEW to WWE side that are making that much of an impact in their programming right now.
It's an interesting one to think about now, because you had the first jump was always going to be the most impactful with Cody, right?
Yeah.
And then Punk had enough of a name that he was always going to go in at the top, and like they run with that, and then they wanted to use it obviously because they want to run the anti-AEW stuff. It made sense. But when you look at all the people that you'd expect to do something more, so the people that are coming out the mid card, because that's where you look at like WCW into WWF, it was people coming out that mid card or lower mid card that went across there and got the spots that were left and grew that business upwards, as well as people who were there previously like The Rock. So you'd hope in their way that you generate some of them, because that's more going to be likely impactful in getting some of the similar talent that are in AEW still that might not be happy with their position to move than anything else.
Right.
And then you look at Starks and it's like, oh, they're still doing, he might get called up soon. Okay, for the 50th time with somebody, after you spent how long has he been in NXT now? Is he like a while, isn't it? It's
when did he get released?
February? Oh. Did he go in February? So he's been there like 6 months now? No, 5 months? I don't know.
You keep talking, I'm Googling.
You Google that one. But obviously then you've got like the Ethan Page thing. He's probably in the spot he's due to be in, so whatever. But that's another one where you look at the name and you think, okay. The Blake Monroe thing is an utter disaster. Complete mess, she looks just lost, and it absolutely feels like a Tony Storm ripoff after originally being like is it Sabrina Carpenter? Is that the right one?
They were trying for Sabrina Carpenter, but she doesn't. But she doesn't have she can't pull that off.
No, she's now.
I'm not trying to say that to.
She's a Tony Storm knockoff now, but she's just messing around on NXT. It's not going anywhere. It doesn't feel like it means anything. There's no buzz over it.
The audience doesn't seem to care.
Yeah, you just took the previous women's champion in AEW, and it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't mean anything. And I think that's a sign, I would look at that and think that's someone that wanted to go there and think, do I really want to follow that? No, probably not. Jade Cargill is now the biggest example. This is someone that her going there was seen as this big loss to AEW. And I think what they probably realised is AEW were protecting somebody far more than their actual kind of value or kind of ability. And they're not able to turn that around. And that says something about them, because they always look at it and think, we train them to our system. But actually, you have not been able to make this wrestler better. You have not been able to increase her presence. You have not been able to get her over your crowd. What does that say about you? Because AEW actually managed to do more with her limited ability than you have. It's kind of a Goldberg thing, right? So I thought that's quite an interesting thing. Did you find your Ricky Starks fit?
February 12th.
February 12th. Yeah, okay, so it's like 5 months. But has anyone got anything to write home about him in 5 months? Anything notable? Anything where, you'd wish you'd made that jump? No? Anything?
They're treating them so much better. Like, I can't believe how, I think Ricky is, Jade at least went to the main roster. I think Ricky, compared to how he was treated in AEW, he's definitely dropped down hugely. And same with Blake Monroe, Mariah May. Like, she's another one where it's like, Jesus, like, this is bad. You look bad here. Like, you're not being presented the level you were presented over there. But
it just makes no sense to me, because we're looking at a potential talent, drop. Once they lose Cena, you start to look at who's going to come through this roster. And we identify like Bron Breakker, and you can look at potentially some on the women's side like Stephanie Vaquer, right? But there isn't many. And the thing is, you need multiple, because some of these will fail. Some of these will never make it.
Right.
And we're not seeing that. And the other way that you're going to attract talent, and you can build your pathways through AAA, and you can build your pathways through the WEID system. But one of the biggest ways you're going to be impact, where you can get talent who have got experience, because there is no house shows and that sort of thing now, and definitely some of them well-traveled talent, is to poach them, quite frankly. And you can poach people like Mike Santana and Joe Hendry from TNA, but they're not of the same level. They're not used to working the same level as you would even in AEW or New Japan or anywhere like that. So it's like, you need that ability to do that. And if you're not financially going to compete, and we've seen them not compete with, Okada, Ospreay, numerous other talents in the last few years, then you have to offer something different. And how many people have we got left where WWE is my dream is going to carry it?
Right.
And it's the same with like even experienced guys. So look at like Penta and Phoenix, okay? So Penta is in a better place than he was in AEW? Yeah, possibly. Phoenix, on the other hand...
Yeah. He's not in a worse place.
Like... Penta.
Phoenix is, yeah.
No, Phoenix is, yeah. Penta is, and the merch money will work for him as a veteran. But for Phoenix, he's just lost. He's lost in the mire. And it's like, I can't look at it and be like an AEW talent who might not be 100% happy with their position. We know how the tiers work in the ceilings and how hard it is to break into the top levels with Tony Khan's booking and etc. But I can't see many of them looking around going, maybe we should try our hand there unless you've exhausted all other options, because they're not offering anything as a visual in the same, especially in the same way that they're offering with Cody. The Cody thing was like, oh, people would look, they would turn their eye. Of course they would. And even someone like Rusev going back, nobody cares about Rusev.
No.
Or Miro.
And they don't care about Malachi Black either.
No. So all these examples of people jumping across, it's very much similar to what happened with AEW in 2022, because we continue to do this kind of phase where they're following exactly the blueprint that AEW set. But it's like, it's very much, you start bringing all these guys in from the other side, and every one of them meant less and less and less. And actually, there wasn't the opportunities for them because the card was full at the top. And then they just kind of stagnated. And then some of them who always thought they were going to come in and walk over everyone got frustrated and they caused their own problems. And we'll see exactly the same thing here, but it's slightly different that you just, and maybe this is just weight of talent, maybe this is just the way that things are now with kind of the longer periods that people are at the top, but you aren't getting this kind of through fair where you think people are going to rise up and then you can replace them or you can move side to side. And I think that's kind of the issue now. We have this kind of two-state system, but it kind of is, isn't it? It's like you've got these big two companies and everything kind of feeds into there, but then there's a ceiling, and how do you get up and how do you get further up is a big question. And then, can the guys that are too old fuck off, as you said earlier, right?
Yeah.
So, but Jade's the latest example, and we're not seeing anybody really make an impact coming from AEW. And considering that you took the former women's champion who was given win at Wembley Stadium last year, you would expect someone here to make more of an impact than any of these currently are.
No, all right, that is my thing I wanted to discuss. So that is our WWE SummerSlam recap. I'm very curious as to what happens tonight. What is your guess? Like, if you I won't hold you to this at all. But like, if you had to guess what's going on tonight, what do you feel like? What do you think?
They're making such a big deal out of it. Like, they think they're going to do something really big, and it's like, well, you've just kind of turned Cena face. You're either going to turn him right back, or you're going to do the Cody turn or something. And it's like, would I want to be running with two heels going into... I don't know. I think the key thing is they have to have Cena face for this last run, right? Because as much as you're making from him as a heel, and you will be making money out of him as a heel on his last run, I'm sure some of these houses, there's a big number in Grand Rapids that I don't think they do a couple of weeks ago without Cena. If you don't, you want him as a babyface in that last run. So he must come out of this as a babyface to me. I think that's what I look at. But... hey, they love moments, right? Elimination Chamber, what a moment. What a great moment. What is Cena turn? Heel turn of the century. And then look what followed. New Day, love that moment. Big moment, big turn, big of the century.
Moment. Huge.
Look what happened after. And I don't know how long you can carry momentum like that. And, we said at the start of the year, they're going to be carried by John Cena, right? They're going to be carried by this retirement. They're carrying him for the year. And then when we get to next year, we'll kind of see where they live. And still remains the same. I don't think anything's changed in that aspect. Have they done damage during this year? I think so. Guess we'll see. We'll see if my hypothesis lives up to it. But, I absolutely do. All right. Enough WWE. Let's move on.
Yeah. Garbage.
Oh, right. So, we'll move on to... What are you laughing for?
I don't know.
The header just says residencies. I don't understand what you're laughing for. But no, okay. So we'll move on to. We've had quite a few questions around kind of AEW in terms of the ratings and the residencies as of late, and I thought they were quite interesting things to talk about. So, in terms of what they did with Dynamite this week, I thought they completely changed the structure from how they normally present world title defenses, and I thought it was really interesting. So, and I think some worked and some didn't, right? So when they normally do a title defense, majority of the time they're wrapped in kind of the branded shows. So this year we've had title defenses on Maximum Carnage. What was that name, by the way? Maximum Carnage. Who come up with that one?
It sounds like a
someone's
movie
going to shout at me. Someone will shout at me for saying that. But I feel like it was.
It's not a small amount of carnage. Okay, it's not even a regular amount of carnage. It is the maximum amount of carnage that you could possibly have.
I feel like it sounds like a Transformers movie, like Transformers 4, Maximum Carnage.
Maximum Carnage. Too fast, too furious. Maximum Carnage. See?
Oh my god. Oh,
I did a pun. Oh, Jesus Christ.
Fucking film puns? That's the level we've devolved to?
Carnage. I'm so proud of myself for that one, goddammit. Somewhere Orange Cassidy is happy.
Okay,
Carnage.
right.
Okay. All right, back to our series.
Okay. So, yeah, we had that one. We had Beach Break with the Samoa Joe and John Moxley cage match. You know, we've traditionally had world title matches on Whenever It's Coming, that sort of thing. So that's kind of something we've traditionally done in AEW. And then normally what they do is they want something big at the start and they put the world title match at the end, or they open with it, right? And because you think, so you're either going to carry the most of your lead-in audience that you can if you open with it, or you're going to build up to it at the end and you're going to put something else big on the show. Because traditionally we've had other big matches on the show. So if you look at like the defense that Moxley had back in January, like the first TV defense of his reign, you know, they put the Kenny Omega return TV match on there. Which we'll talk about in a minute, actually, because I got some points on that. And then, so, no, but they've done similar things to that, like, all the way through, and they didn't do that. So this match was, like, the only kind of big thing on this show. There was other matches announced, but it was, like, standard Dynamite. You know, they opened with a video package, which is one of those things where you're going to look at it and think, did this have long-term benefit? Because it's going to destroy your short-term rating, right? So your lead-in quarter was 0.13 down from 0.18 last week. So huge decrease. And we don't have the Big Bang Theory for this week last week. Last week was only, what was it, 0.11? Yeah, 0.11. So it's not like, you know, they had this huge lead-in last week that generated that number. No, it was the standard lead-in. But this week they had a much, much lower first quarter. And I think part of that is that you open with a video package. Because the idea is that you can spike an individual rating, right? They could have done something shocking in this match, the same way they did with the Copeland-Moxley spike thing. Yeah. And you get that, like, spike in the rating where people will come out and see it. Or you can do, like, a gimmick, like a steel cage or something like that. But what they did instead was they, like, open with a video package. And the idea is like, this feels important. So when you watch it, you feel like it's important. Did they then kind of turn that by not having it in a main event? Possibly. But the idea was to do something different with that segment, and it cost them for that first bit. But you think, it's about long-term value, right? You're putting long-term value into Adam Page by giving him all this build to this match. And then it was kind of interesting because they put it across 4, 5, and 6. And, you know, they saw substantial growth in those quarters, but the show started so low and then it finished so low that it cost them a little bit there. And then it just, you know, had a kind of a very fluke kind of male 35-49, lowest since first 29 rating as well. So you kind of had these things against it. But what I thought was really interesting is that they chose to use it to cover like the quarters that are currently the hardest. Because if you're not aware, especially if you don't live in America, there's 2 big bits of competition right now, especially in the younger demos, which is Big Brother, which finishes at 9:30. And the challenge, which is dual cast, but finishes at 9:20. So what they did, or 9:20, sorry Americans. So they tried to use it to cover what have become, over the last few weeks, some of the harder quarters. And you can tell that they're reacting, they must be losing people to Big Brother because all of a sudden MJF's appeared in the last 2 quarters of the show for the first time in 2 fucking years, right? Yeah. It's like, it's the most visible thing ever. So they tried to use it in a different way than what they've traditionally done. You know, they didn't have the gimmick. They didn't do this huge social media thing, you know, that they did for the Viking O'Kenny match or the Samoa Joe Hook match or anything like that. And it seemed like a long-term play, as in, you know, this is our guy sort of thing, and we're going to tell you that. But we're also going to try these other things around it. And, you know, it's hard to... You can look at it on paper and go, yeah, it's a disappointing rating. You can also look at it and go, we don't have the full picture, but we're kind of bored of saying it, but we all know. And you can also look at it and think the male-women differences were very, very interesting. And... You know,
those numbers were fucking crazy.
Yeah, so, but it's what I think kind of stuck with me over the kind of last few weeks since All In is how they've struggled kind of with secondary programming. You know, when you look at that, and they're just, and that's where I look at the end of this match and okay, am I thrilled that they put it in the middle of the show and not the end and kind of devalue it by then saying, oh, next week in the main event sort of thing at the end of the match? No. But they seem to be more interested in getting to the next program. So we need to move Moxley on into the Derby program, which is good. Because that's an immediately strong second program, which we've not had on the men's side. And we haven't got a secondary program on the women's side that's strong either, to be fair. But it's the same thing. So immediately you get that second program going now with Darby and Moxley. Good. We need that. And then you get your main program going with MJF and Paige, and then, you know, Mark Briscoe and however he's involved there. So they seem to be focused more on that than anything else. What have you thought of some of the other programs they've run since?
I think you're right in that they're missing like a strong secondary program. The tag stuff is interesting, but you know, I think a lot of these tournaments, until you kind of get to the end and figure out, like, I mean, they're clearly going for something with FTR, and you know how that's going to tie into the Pope and Christian thing. We'll see.
I think they're winning the tag belts.
Yeah.
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 I don't winning the tag belts of Endor. Yeah.
And then I think Swerve and Okada is a mismatch. I guess would be the best way to describe it. Regardless of like who you think is winning, I just don't know whether these guys, like, you know, you talk about like wrestling soulmates and people with incredible wrestling chemistry. I don't know that these guys have strong wrestling chemistry.
Can I say the thing about Cardiff programs in general is that they are so formulaic that there's no interest in them until the match.
They're very paid by numbers.
Like Swerve has lost his voice. He's in his Jay White program.
Right.
And I think that's kind of disappointing coming off, you know, the way he was laid into the main event. And I have no doubt that he'll go back into big stories after this, you know?
Yeah,
but it just
I'm not
feels,
worried about Swerve.
No,
yeah.
But it just feels like when you're, and I know they're short, right? And this is why, you know, Collision's been kind of, had a few weeks where they were kind of short on talent as well, because the first time, whenever they're short on talent, they go back to the same thing, they protect Dynamite. And when you have that shortage of talent, I don't feel like we've used Swerve well enough to cover for some of those gaps.
Right.
And the fact that he's not talking pretty much at all now, and everything just kind of feels like, oh, we just need to get him on the show somehow. I found it disappointing coming out of All In, and the Okada match, I hope it'd be much better than the one they had last year. Yeah. I hope Okada steps up in that way, but I'm always just left with, when it comes to Okada at the moment, where I'm always kind of waiting for something to kick in that interests me. Yeah. And I don't get it. It's like, he's a great tournament wrestler. He's great for using that match. When you want him on a big match, you know, people still recognise their name especially for what he did in New Japan, but I just don't get anything from him in weekly television. I get less from him now that he's trying to be serious than I did when he said bitch. Like,
that's where, like, I would have preferred to have seen. And again, I don't know in terms of what's going on with Kenny and everything else, but I think Kenny winning those belts would have been so much more interesting, because watching Okada in defeat would have at least given you maybe something on a character level that would be different.
Yeah,
right?
he could have fought. He could have fought back, and then you have you can do the face thing, and maybe that's easier.
Right.
You know.
Right. But, like, you know, this is just a continuation of what we had before, except, like you said, less interesting, because he's not doing anything even slightly funny. You know. I don't know. I'm not worried about Swerve, because Swerve's going to be fine no matter what he's doing. Like, he's been in shit programs before with people haven't given him anything, and he hasn't come out worse off. Like, he always manages to salvage it somehow. But it's just, it sort of underlines for you the lack of, like, a strong secondary program. MJF and Mark Briscoe, like, again, it's another one where you're kind of like, okay, it's hard to imagine that Mark Briscoe's going to win any of these matches. Maybe he will. Like, but it just sort of seems like, you know, another sort of paint by numbers thing until you can get to MJF and Hangman, which will be fine. But, you know, again, you're not getting a lot from MJF, right? Ever at this point.
Oh no, I think we've had the debate on this before, and I think that Paige gets more out of him than anybody. I think the little backstage segments have been, you know, he's kind of been tempered in a way that works more for me than anything else that he does. But I just think that, look, it's one of those things where it's kind of funny because I keep hearing people saying, well, when they're doing this and when they're doing that, and it should be like growing after All In. But actually, when you create All In, you create like this WrestleMania period, right? And then you create this thing where everybody sticks around for the build, and they live out any injuries they've got because they want to make the big show. And then you have this down period, which is exactly the same thing that we see in WWE, like every spring, right? We go April, May, June, and then they pick up July for SummerSlam. And the reason SummerSlam is where it is to get that pickup in the summer, because one, summer's weak for TV anyway. And secondly, you have that point in a year, so you stop that decay that comes after WrestleMania because you lose all the big stars, and for them it's all the part-timers, right? They used to always, and still do, those like Roman Reigns will disappear every April. We kind of, it is as it is, but sorry Roman, but it's like, it's the same thing. So you've gone from having all these massively strong programs with several programs underneath. You had your men's world title program, and then you had the big tag title program. Well, not tag title program, tag program. Where the tag title should have been. There we go. Yeah, with Bucks, with Bucks, Swerve, and Ospreay, and then underneath that you've got Kenny and Okada, and then underneath that you've got this MJF thing chasing, a title shot on the second one going out to Hangman, and then then
you had Tony and Mercedes.
Yes, and then thank you. Then on the women's side, you've got Tony and Mercedes, which is the biggest women's program to go on. You've lost Mercedes since she's back this week. So it's like you went from having all these strong programs. And do you remember when we did the Death Rider thing after Dynasty?
Yes.
And we talked about AEW in terms of like the quote everyone likes to use, turnaround. But everything there is a collective in that regard. Like they have never had a period of time where they've grown, where they've only had one program. And I thought you could see that, really clearly when you looked at like the quarters last week, where you had a really strong first quarter, and then the rest of the show is 23.5% less, because there is nothing underneath right now that's capturing people. So it's really, really important that you get some of those going. And maybe it's a weird time because it's Forbidden Door, but Forbidden Door this year is an AEW pay-per-view, not only just, in everything but name, which it always has been, but this show kind of more than ever.
This time is really obvious.
Yeah. And
well, in my house, we used to talk about something when I was growing up called post-vacation letdown. And I think that you can point to like a post-all-in letdown to some degree. Like you had this big show, you had these big programs, they all culminated in something. And you've kind of had this sort of like, okay, we've got people out, people needed breaks, we weren't going to give them time off when we were heading into this big show, so now we're going to kind of take a breath, take a down moment. I think they've used the time wisely.
Yep.
I think they've set the stage for a bunch of different things. I think they've cemented Hangman as a champion in a way that they really needed to.
I think they've done a good job with Tony as well.
Yes, they've really sort of put them there as, like, they've really used the time to strengthen both of them and make them both look unbeatable, which I think is excellent. I don't think it's a bad thing. This is one of those things where I'm just kind of like, you're going to have, like you said, little downtimes, and you just got to set the stage. And with Forbidden Door being less of a door and more of just another AEW pay-per-view, do you think at this point that there's going to be... What do you think the potential matches from either Japan or CMLL is going to potentially... Stardom doesn't seem like that's even possible, given the number of folks that are...
I think they probably thought they were going to have Suri.
Yes.
Who was on excursion.
I was literally just thinking this. Get out of my fucking head.
Thank you. I think they thought they were going to have Suri, and I imagine they were probably going to do something as Suri and Mercedes. That would have made sense to me. And, maybe they would have done something. We've got this, Athena Tony Storm match, and you would have had Mina Shirakawa more involved. And it seems to be like they're taking people that used to be in Stardom and New Japan and kind of putting them into these programs at times to try and kind of cover the fact that we're not using talent from Stardom, New Japan, and CML. And to an extent, like, there's so many different parts of this, because I look at it and think, you can look at that New Japan roster and you think, who would headline this show? And there isn't anybody right now.
No.
Okay? Like, the only person that you can possibly think of doing is putting Tanahashi in the main event because he's it's his last appearance in the UK. How much that means to the average AEW fan, I don't know. But you could possibly do that. I don't think they've ever looked at putting a New Japan person in this main event. In fact, the earliest kind of main events we heard for this show had no one in New Japan in it, let alone what we're going to get now. Yeah. So I think they've always kind of looked at that. They looked at the blueprint of what happened last year, and when actually, we put Swerve and Ospreay in the main event, we used it to tell our stories as well as doing these kind of undercard matches, and that worked just fine. And I think that's what they're looking at here. And especially when you're going into the O2, a huge building that's charging massive prices, this will smash their arena gate record by some degree, because the ticket prices are really expensive. It's the most expensive arena show they've ever run. You know, way more expensive than any other show I can think of. I think back at like the second Grand Slam and the third Grand Slam where everyone kind of complained about the ticket prices. But this thing is so vast and they're going to sell so many that it's going to dwarf both of those. And some of them were quite heavily comped as well, whereas this one won't be as much. So you need to deliver something that people think it's worth the price that they paid. You know, you don't want to leave them with thinking, we were shortchanged for that, and then all of a sudden you're going to put Wembley there in the next year, where you really need to get people in early on that on sale. So you need to deliver a whole card that is worthy of the price because you need it. You can't afford to have a fuck up ending of a show or a show that people don't receive in this market because you need them in that stadium next year, and it's much harder than it was 2 years ago.
Do you think that people will be disappointed that the British people or people coming to the show from Europe will be disappointed that this isn't more of a Forbidden Door show and that will potentially impact how they feel about AEW and pay-per-views moving forward? Or do you think they'll be happy with getting an AEW show?
Well, I think there will be people on the undercard from CML, from New Japan, from Stardom. And even though we know that the G1 finishes a week before, so we only have New Japan talent available a week before outside the juniors, and the 5-star Grand Prix finishes the day before, literally the day before. So other than anyone that you can spare potentially, which obviously now we've lost Surim, probably not, but there might be someone else that it can fly in, fly back out, I don't know. But it's highly unlikely. And then the CML question is actually kind of more interesting because those wrestlers, this week we had a number of CML wrestlers at the show. You know, you have Mystico at the show, you don't have them interact with MJF, which I think is something you probably don't want to do right now, because if you're going to run that at the anniversary, I can't fucking pronounce, fuck it. The 19th of September show for CMLL, your 92nd show, if you're going to run MJF and Mystico at that show, you don't want to give away the result of Forbidden Door by doing anything now with it, right? So you're going to have to leave that announcement until after there. You're going to have to be very careful with that one. So they don't want them interacting, but they have those wrestlers there and we're not building anything to there, which says to me we're going to throw a lot of undercard kind of tags in. I think most people will be happy with that, because as much as I think there's a bigger audience for New Japan here still than there is probably in America, concentrated when we see some of the numbers, and obviously we've had quite a few of the talent there over there regularly in Rev Pro and that sort of thing. They are still very much in the same vein that we see with the American fan base, and that we've seen at Forbidden Door, is that they want to see Tanahashi. They still see Okada as a New Japan guy. They want to see him. You know, they probably want to see Naito. Well, and we'll see what happens with Naito. That's a whole nother story. But
the thing, I will say this briefly as an aside, I think it's fascinating, and I don't think this is part of the plan, but given some of the issues with visas that people have had, I think they may have an easier time booking some people for this show in the UK because they don't have to deal with some of the visa issues they have to deal with in the US.
Well, they absolutely will. Yeah, it's much easier, and there's working agreements between the UK and US that make things more favourable to work here anyway. And UK and Japan that make things more favourable. We have trade agreements that help as well. So they will have less issues with that. But I don't think that anyone going to this show will be disappointed in terms of, they will see the people they want to see, but there's these matchups. There may be a few who are, if you're really invested in current New Japan or current Stardom or current CMLL, you might be, but the majority of the fan base that are going to go to these shows will be probably first and foremost AEW fans.
Yeah.
And it's that same thing when we talked about, Kenny and Okada that we saw a couple of weeks ago, where the people that hadn't seen it before were much more higher than the people that have. But actually, it felt like, in a lot of ways, there was a lot of people that felt like that who just they've seen the idea of it, right? Seen the concept, or we may have seen bits of it, but we haven't seen actually it, and they'll just be happy to see those people. But they want the high-profile matches as well, and there's a benefit to that too. We've talked about this a number of times, that sometimes when they go to the UK, or they go to other places, they start doing this local thing, we have to do the local wrestler, and it pisses people off. People want to see, people want to see that product, and they want to see the best of that product. So if you give them, an MJF Adam Page match, that's probably going to go far more down better than if you run Hangman Page and Shingo Takagi, as great as Shingo is, or Goto, or anyone like that. So I don't think it will diminish the people that actually go to this show's opinion of it. I don't think it will hurt the buy rate. In fact, I think the buy rate will go up on this show, and I think it'll be the second show to go up in in a row, which will be the first time since Revolution and Double or Nothing 2021 that that's ever happened. Funny how these things work out. But it's like, I do think that it will probably increase interest in it, because that concept of Forbidden Door, especially now that you have so much kind of talent from these companies on the TV on a regular basis as well, it's not a foreign concept anymore. It's not forbidden. You know, this is the door that's walked through every fucking week. It's like, it's not the same thing anymore. So I don't have as much of an issue with it. We knew this was coming as well. We've been, you know, for weeks I've been kind of saying, like, you can see, like, I wonder how people are going to find this. It'll be the latest thing they can complain about. But I don't... Well, I did say that last week, yeah. I told somebody, didn't I? I was just like, yeah, like, look, you can have this to complain about instead, shut up. But it's, I'm such a nice person. But it's, yeah, I am, thank you. I'm completely distracted now. But it's one of those things where there are logistic issues. There's also issues with the status of the companies, which are, you know, pretty bearable. Could there have been more if someone like Swerve Strickland or Ricochet went and worked the G1? Possibly. But that's not necessarily in AEW's hands either. And New Japan has to look after its own business, and we've seen this kind of taking away of the international business this year, where they've pulled back, and there's no current, you know, dates for the US at all. It doesn't look like there's going to be a Royal Quest, being that we've kind of given Tanahashi's last match in the UK to Forbidden Door. So you're seeing this kind of, what's the word, like isolationism in a way.
Ooh.
Yeah, sorry, very political today. But you are seeing this isolationism in terms of the way they're running their business as current, where they're pulling back from this kind of international expansion that we felt that we saw, you know, through the last part of the 2010s and into the start of, and they tried to maintain it for as long as possible now. So it's obvious that there's bigger things to kind of on their kind of on their plate than this. And I also wonder, how much does Wrestle Dynasty affect things?
Yeah.
Because, yes, they got Kenny Omega, and I think Kenny Omega would made that choice anyway, regardless. But the consideration that they sent how many people from the top of their roster when they were at their highest for the previous few years, and then when it came to that show, and yes, you know, it was a TNT Collision debut on Mags, fine, but the talent that was said, you can look at who was working that card and you can still see there was plenty of other talent that could have been sent and weren't. And how much does that play into, and how much that financially has hurt them. And there's loads of stories about how that dome came about or whatever, but it's like, how much does that impact this now and their thinking in New Japan wise? You know, so how much of this is kind of Tony looking at it and going, you know, what's the best value I can provide for this pay-per-view and this huge building and what people actually want to see, and then how much is it the other side going, well, look what you gave us for this, and actually we suffer from that, and what are we going to give you here because we need to prioritise the G1 and prioritise our business, and then we're trying to rebuild and find a way to get out of this kind of slump that we're in, you know, prior to, especially financially, following kind of Naito going. So you have that mix of different things, and I don't know if we'll ever really know kind of how this is being put together and why not, but I do think there's quite a few reasons that you can see, like, very viable ones for everything that's kind of happening with each party. Other than maybe the CMLL, because I don't really kind of get why they're not involved in anything currently outside of building Death Before Dishonor with Hechicero, who's kind of, he's dual contracted now, but yeah, that's in Bandido. That's like the only talent from there that's actually building anything currently in AEW.
That's a little weird, but
yeah, there we go. We'll see. But he's looking a good card though, in general. Yeah. And we'll see what they add to it. And, you know, last year I thought the undercard tags were some of the most fun things. The Mystico one with LIJ was, and was that Penta and Phoenix? Oh my god, it feels so long ago. It really wasn't that long ago. But no, that was one that
it does feel a long time ago, doesn't it?
Me. Britt Baker came back as like the big surprise. That was the big surprise of that show. Britt Baker coming back, isn't it? It's crazy. Yep. So, just before we get on to the residency topic, I just want to I'll go through a question that we've got from a listener, and then I'll go through the last bit because that leads into that. It's a question from our friend Ander. What are your thoughts on Tony Khan's line of thinking of announcing matches on the day versus announcing matches in advance? So this all started from Tony's mansion walk.
Whew.
Video on
Twitter. Yes, Tony went on Twitter Live at his parents' house and showed us some very expensive pieces of artwork that his parents own and discussed those. And this was sort of a deranged Twitter Live. So he started off by talking about art, and then he started talking about wrestling, and then he was like, Colt Cabana has a wrestling podcast called Art of Wrestling and we're in Chicago. Like, it was fucking, like, it was one of those moments where you're like, this man's brain is a crazy and weird little thing. But part of what he talked about was that he said on this Twitter Live that he likes to post the... he had gotten a question about this in the media call the day before. It's something that Brian Alvarez has talked about quite a bit, and it was something about he likes to post on Twitter because they get the match announcements at the last minute because they get much more Twitter engagement and social media engagement by doing this. So this is one of those topics, Trish, where I find myself in agreement, theoretically, with the people criticizing it, but the way that they criticize it is so off-putting to me that I turn around and end up being sympathetic to Tony Khan because I'm like, Jesus fucking Christ, people. I think that this is dumb, ultimately. I don't think in the year of our Lord 2025 that Twitter is a good indicator of popularity of something. I don't think that Twitter in 2025 is really useful for building your brand. I mean, what did they just say this week? That it's possible that like 70% of people on Twitter are bots, like they're not actual human beings. So to me, this seems sort of dumb. I think that in terms of growing the actual TV audience and in terms of growing your people coming to see your show, we've talked about this quite a bit. If you're going to go pay money to be in the audience of a Dynamite or a Collision, you should have a general idea of what you're going to see, either before you spend the money or pretty damn soon afterwards. And we've had way too many shows where people show up and have absolutely no fucking clue who's going to be on the card or what the expectation is that they can see. So I think there have to be some matches that you're announcing ahead of time. Do I think that he's doing, like, realistically, I don't think Tony Khan is announcing these matches late because he cares about Twitter engagement. I think there's a lot of times where he just doesn't fucking know what's going to be on the show. He has an idea, but he's not 100% sure, and he doesn't want to advertise it because it might not end up happening. So I don't really believe it. So in that regard, when people get really worked up and excited about it, I'm kind of like, you're getting mad about something that might not even be true. So why are we getting all berserko about this? Like, I don't know. Like, discuss the real issue, which is that, there's a lot of last minute running around back there, which isn't helpful to the product. And it doesn't help with selling tickets. That's the problem, not the fucking Twitter shit. So, yeah, I think it's dumb. I think it's kind of a cover for, like, I didn't do my homework. But I think it does seem like it's something they have sort of swung back to rectifying slightly. We've had some matches announced a week out. He does seem to be, putting 2 or 3 big things on the card to sort of sell tickets or promote locally and, going from there.
Yeah.
That's where I'm at with this, Trish.
So there's like different parts of this. So I agree that he has become more organised this year in general.
Yeah.
And we have seen more matches announced a week in advance than we definitely did the last couple of years. And some of that is, I think he has more of a vision of where he wants to go to. And also, I think it's important in terms of not just ticketing, but it makes the brand look like more organised, like it knows where it's going, like it has a vision, like it is doing itself. And I think we saw that especially... Yeah, and we saw that especially over the summer where they ran, the Denver 4-hour taping where they knew they had to have something big on that, and they put in the Kenny Omega match, and then the following week they ran Swerve and Will Ospreay in Portland, and it's the same thing. And then we knew that we had Grand Slam Mexico, and we had the branded shows because the branded shows have traditionally been really good for them. But it's like we always felt like they had a plan during the summer, and I think that feeling and that they had something, and same with the Owen tournament as well running through. So you always felt like you had something there, and you're right, it gives them something that's really important for their late ticket sales, because we're at a situation now with AEW where we've spoken about this 1,000 times, it feels like, where you don't always get the huge hit at first. The first sales are not massive because people have been trained to buy their tickets late, but they've also been trained, especially outside of pay-per-views, that you will not know who's on this card. So if you really want to see someone, you might end up disappointed. So actually what you're going to do is you're going to wait till you find out, and you might not go unless you know that person's on. It's completely opposite to the WWE mentality of you'll know Cody Rhodes is on the show, you'll know when Roman Reigns is on the show, you'll know when Rhea Ripley's on this show, etc. And that's been something that's been detrimental and holding them back now for a lot of period of time, because that's why you've trained people into that. And there's ways you can get out of it, as we'll talk about with the residencies in a minute, and whether that's effective or not in doing so. But you will never get past a point unless you kind of have people having the belief of who will be on this show, and also that we're going to see something of value, especially with, you know, when you look at more expensive ticket prices. And that's why the pay-per-views are so much more successful than the TV in terms of ticket sales, and will continue to be, and especially now that we're not on 4 pay-per-views a year where people are flying in, but we're on 9. So you are creating this extra demand around your pay-per-view and an expanded calendar, and then you have a live calendar with TV that you then have to kind of not forfeit, but you're kind of, people are choosing one or the other, and especially now that you have the extended TV calendar because you've added Collision, which I think has been a bane for them from a live ticketing perspective since its induction. So it's difficult, and it's great to say, oh, I put them on Twitter because I get that engagement, but I think there's a few things to that. He probably thinks it works because, as we spoke about earlier, it worked with the Samoa Joe and Hook thing, right? They drove up a load of Twitter buzz for 3 or 4 days beforehand, made it a big like talking point, and it worked for great number rating. They did the same thing with Kenny Omega and Vikingo, and that's not to diminish like Kenny, but it's like they drew up huge budge and it caused them a rating. So they think that Twitter's like the center of conversation, but I don't think Twitter, and even like a few years ago, is the same as Twitter now. We've seen an exodus of their fan base to Blue Sky, which they don't kind of cater to at all. In fact, the AEW bot that's on Blue Sky that people keep shouting at does more job for them of catering to their audience on there than they do themselves, and that's something you need to address. If I go on to Twitter, am I going to see like hundreds of like videos and stuff of things where people are taking a match that's upcoming and kind of being excited about it in that kind of discussion? And that's discussion that we used to see on Twitter. You look back at 2020, 2021, we'd see that discussion where people would be excited about something building up for the week after when it was announced. We don't get that on Twitter anymore. And maybe he thinks that because we don't get it on Twitter anymore, we need that last minute engagement. But what happened is that discussion and that kind of secondary engagement has moved to other places. So you'll see them videos and that things on TikTok or on Instagram. And you'll see...
TikTok has gotten huge,
it's huge
when it comes to AEW content.
God.
There's a lot of AEW content on TikTok.
Yeah, are they, so actually if you put things on there earlier, because the way that TikTok works is you pick up a subject, right, and then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yep.
So you make something bigger, and then you'll see like 1,000 imitating videos. We've seen like the fucking Jet 2 advert that's gone fucking nuts. Like, what the fuck is it? How is that? Like, nothing beats a Jet 2 holiday.
A Jet 2 holiday.
You've got 6-year-olds in fucking Australia doing that. Like, what the fuck? Like, go on. Sorry.
I was listening to Sirius Radio in the car, and the freaking woman was like, you know what to do when the song comes on, and they played the song, and I literally went, nothing beats a Jet 2 holiday. Fucking Pavlovian at this point.
Do you even know what fucking Jet 2 is? Like, what it looks like?
Yes, it's a freaking
you actually
holiday package place. Yeah, of course I know what Jet 2 is. Like,
I know. I don't mean...
Yeah, come on.
I don't mean like that, but it's like... It's just become this thing, right? Because once you get it to kind of go to a big point, then it goes viral and that sort of thing. But the way that you do that, so you have to encourage secondary engagement. That's how that whole works. TikTok is encouraging secondary engagement, right? You have one thing and everybody jumps off the back of it. So if you announce matches earlier and you set someone off and like they talk about the story or they talk about this, or do you remember this moment? That's going to create far more engagement than announcing something a few hours before, right? It's a different way of doing things. And it's the same with, actually, when we get like a match discussion, we want to discuss the outcomes and that, people go to Discord now. They do it there. Yeah. They're not doing that discussion on Twitter anymore. So you're getting this kind of like, you might see, oh, I'm getting more engagement at this point. But what you've actually failed to realise is that the way people are discussing things has changed. The amount of people that are interacting with your content at that point has changed. And the people that want to interact with it in different ways now aren't doing it on that medium. They've moved to otherwise. And you need to react to that balkanisation that I always talk about on social media.
Yeah.
So... yeah, I do agree with you that sometimes I think it's just like, especially the last couple of weeks, look, they've had lots of disruption. We can see that. We can see that Mina Shirakawa coming out of that one. They plugged Alex Windsor in, fine. Yeah, we can do disruption with like Will Ospreay being out, with Kenny Omega being out. There's plenty of others as well that have been limited or can't do this and can't do that, or we've had to change things up, or, Bucks are away for a week, whatever. But it's like, so I think a lot of it has been that, but obviously you don't want to say that. And Colton Gunn, was it Colton Gunn got injured? Colton. Yeah. So it's another one. So you've got all these kind of disruptions, and I think that's just left to it feeling kind of that. So I don't believe that it's, we just want to announce today. Your big stuff needs to be a week before. or 2 weeks before if it's really, really big. That's how it works, and that gets you to generate the late sales, because you need the late sales because people don't trust to buy early.
Right.
And that's been a consistent problem because you don't guarantee who's going to be there. That's no different as it ever was, is it? So I don't believe that it creates better ratings. I also don't believe that I think that Twitter is also concentrated in male 18 to 34, which is when we've seen them spikes generated by Twitter. So we look at the Vikingo match and the Samoa Joe match. Male 18 to 34 was where you saw the spikes. And that makes sense because that's the people that you're generating to. But especially when you look at, not to kind of pick out a demo, but when you look at women especially, you'll see much bigger spikes for a match that's promoted on TV that they're into than you will for anything that's announced on Twitter on a day. And that's been consistent all the way through. So it's about how people engage and control, kind of consume content as well. And you need to be appealing to as many of those groups as possible. So you may have something that appeals to that younger male demographic and use Twitter for that, but you can't then ignore everything else. You can't just say this is how the only way that we're going to do things. And that's what that feels like when you just say this is why we do this on Twitter on this day.
Yeah.
All right. One other question on this bit as well. So we've seen, Adam Page has had the belt for 3 weeks? 3 weeks? 3 weeks.
Yes, it was literally 3 weeks ago that we were in Texas. Fucking insane.
Crazy. And there's quite a lot of analysis on his reign already, which is quite interesting because it's been 3 weeks. And a lot of these things were kind of known beforehand because we knew we were going to go into the residency period and some weaker houses and then see what comes out the other side because they're looking at different solutions to kind of how they run TV with the way that pay-per-views also changed for them. Before I talk about Mox's promo, what have you thought of how much he's been analysed so far? Are you surprised by it?
No, of course not. Dudes have agendas. We've known this for a long time. And they're getting fed stuff by people who also have fucking agendas. Mm-hmm. Let's not forget that, again, All In was extremely, extremely successful. And a lot of that there were a lot of successful programs on that. I'm not trying to take it away, but a lot of that was also on Hangman beating Moxley. And so there's going to be an effort from WWE state media and their friends to talk about how, and to de-emphasize and talk about how that's, not actual real, right? And the quickest way you can do that is by saying, look, he maybe they did 30,000 people in Texas, but wow, look, they're not drawing now. The ratings are bad now, blah, blah, blah. Even though you're going to ignore the fact that no fucking buddy has blown a giant rating right after a WrestleMania or another big show like that. It doesn't happen like that anymore. But, people are happy to push this stuff. It's fine. You and I really enjoy puncturing those stupid arguments. So please, Trish, let's talk about how dumb some of these arguments are.
Is that what we're doing? Oh, okay.
I think that's what you're going to do.
Are you presuming?
I'd be shocked if you agreed with them.
Are you presuming what I'm going to do? Okay.
I have talked to you in the last week.
Nah. So what I thought was really interesting is that they predicted this on the show. And they literally said it's going to happen, and we're going to prove it to you that it's not, right? So you have John Moxley come out and say, his way of getting the rematch is to say, okay, he played into the same thing that Bryan Danielson did when Page won the belt the first time. And he's kind of like, it's a fluke, you had your moment, yeah, you're great, you showed something that night to get done, but can you do it again tomorrow? Can you do it again tomorrow? Can you do it again tomorrow? And then Page plays on that then when he goes in the promo to challenge Moxley. And he's like, well, you don't think I can do this again and do it again. I'm going to prove it to you, right? They're ahead of this rhetoric before you even started, which is kind of funny. And he is going to be the most microanalyzed champion that AEW have ever had. And they're going to set bars for him that they've never set for anybody else, yeah? So it'll be like, why isn't it on sale up massively? It should have been up the week after he won as champion. And then you look back at when CM Punk won the belt in 2022, did that happen? No. When this person came back or that person back, did that happen? No. And we've just talked about the structural issues that actually prevent people from buying tickets at the start. And Paige is traditionally a late ticket seller. We know that. But it's we're going to set these bars for him that we aren't going to set for anybody else. And we're going to look for these turnaround numbers and all these other things, especially harder now that we don't have max numbers and we don't know the full picture, but we're going to set these things anyway. But I thought it was really interesting that they are so much ahead of the rhetoric that they literally incorporated into the story. And it's you think this guy is not going to be able to do it again, maybe he's just a chaser. And it's you'll get up and do it again tomorrow. And that thought kind of stuck in my head, because you think about the pressure that involves in like being a world champion, and the fact that we still put all of everything on the male world champion. Never mind that we can have a women's world champion at the same level, you know, who can draw numbers. You know, we've seen Toni Storm draw shows. We've seen her draw quarters. You know, we've seen her draw live attendances. We've seen her draw at 1 in the morning in Grand Slam Australia, right? But we still have this impetus that everything is around the male world champion. Okay, fine. But get up and do it again. All right. And it doesn't matter what kind of numbers that are involved in this. You have to get up and do it again tomorrow. And it doesn't matter, you know, Big Brother kicked off the week before Berlin, or the Challenge last week, which is dual cast. We had other network premieres that are going to kick in. You get up and do it again tomorrow. It doesn't matter that you have no visible secondary programs right now. You know, and Omega and Mercedes and Ospreay are all missing, or Swerve's doing inconsequential things. You know, you still got to get up and do it again tomorrow. It doesn't matter that the first step after All In, you know, saw a 24.6% pickup after in DVR, you know, after a whole week of content that was just like insane amount. You get up and do it again tomorrow. It doesn't matter that his opening quarter last week was a 0.18, you know, 232K after a 0.11 lead in, 23.7% higher than the rest of the show average, second highest difference in that regard of the year, with compared to a 13% standard pickup. You know, that saves them from a really poor rating. You have to get up and do it again tomorrow. It doesn't matter the Mox match grew 30% in the demo, more growth for any world title match since June 2021. You get up and do it again tomorrow. It doesn't matter the show started at a 0.13 and dropped off at the end, which is probably the difference between a 0.15 and a high 0.16, 0.17. You get up and do it again tomorrow. It doesn't matter that the female 35 to 49 was the second highest of the year behind Grand Slam. You know, with female 18 to 49 up 44% in the last 4 weeks. You get up and do it again tomorrow. It doesn't matter that you have a disappointing male 35 to 49 number, you know, which cost them the rating, lowest since 29 for the first. You get up and do it again tomorrow. It doesn't matter that the match finished higher in the demo than the last match between two world champions back in May. It wasn't on a branded show, and the pickup on the week before was the same as the last 3 championship matches without gimmick or branding. You get up and do it again tomorrow. It doesn't matter the Thursday saw big collision growth against big competition, which is exactly what you want to see after a future program, you know, future programming after a big match, and especially when they run the trailer for it right after the match. You get up and do it again tomorrow. Oh, it's the same demos, in fact. Same demos that went up. That's exactly the normal impact that you expect. And it won't matter when Dynamite goes up next week, likely off the same back of the same thing of having this big match. It will be given to your next opponent. Doesn't matter, you get up and do it again tomorrow. Are you getting bored yet? We're going to carry on. I need a breather. Okay. It doesn't matter that All In had 29K, right? 29K after a 9,600 on sale. It doesn't matter that the WrestleTix final number, if we take that, you know, with what they calculate, at 27,245, compared to the 9,600 number, was up 184% on the starting number, compared to Wembley, which was up 82% on its starting number. It doesn't matter that they added 44% of the final number, compared to 24% the year before. You get up and do it again tomorrow. It doesn't matter that you did that with WWE counter-programming you with a counter-destination and putting several whole shows within the driving distance. It doesn't matter that this year's first estimate on pay-per-view was 4th in company history and already 11% up on last year's final day number of 158K. Get up and do it again tomorrow. And it won't matter when Forbidden Door ends up either. And it's the first back-to-back pay-per-views up since 2021. Get up and do it again tomorrow. It doesn't matter that All In was watched by 111,000 viewers in the UK on ITV, up from 63,000 in 2023, up 76%, even though it finished at 3 a.m. It doesn't matter that they sold $725,000, fucking hell, dollars for merchandise at that show, right? At $30 a head, when Wembley was at $17, and your merch was fucking sold out like days before. Get up and do it again tomorrow. It doesn't matter that you have the best-selling shirt of the year, and also the overall for the last calendar year. Get up and do it again tomorrow. It doesn't matter that you inherited some poor starting advances with 2 residency periods built in. It doesn't matter that all 3 Dynamites have sold out within residencies that you've been advertised in, with barely any comps whatsoever on VetTix according to WrestleTix. It doesn't matter that your rematch with Moxley created the largest get-in price on the week of a show, being at $234 on the morning of the event, and no one bothered to report it. Get up and do it again tomorrow. It doesn't matter that Cleveland, which you aren't even advertised for, is following the exact same pattern as last year, despite not being branded as a Fright Night, and WWE being there last week and down 25% on the last visit. Get up and do it again tomorrow. It won't matter whatever final number will be credited to, because it's not going to be credited to you, but you will be blamed for the start. It doesn't matter that your collision show in... Say the town for me, please.
Roanoke.
Thank you. Had one calendar month to sell, just like Atlanta early in the year, and has the same pattern, funny enough. And it doesn't matter that you've moved 727 tickets over the last week and are now 17 tickets off the Collision average and a town population of 97,000. And it doesn't matter that Charlotte, North Carolina population, just under 10 times that of that town, did 2,941 in January on the Collision debut on Max. Get up and do it again tomorrow. By the way, if it does over 3,000, it'll be the biggest Collision number of the year, and you might have to control me. Okay. Anyway, it doesn't matter that you set the pay-to-company record for this last visit with Norfolk, with the top days being after your match was announced and the 2 days that you did press. And yes, you need to go out and do press this week, Hanger. And was the biggest Dynamite of the year at that point. So we know the pattern that comes into Virginia shows with him. Don't matter, get up and do it again tomorrow. It doesn't matter that Forbidden Door will set the gate record by some margin for arenas. You get up and do it again tomorrow. It doesn't matter that none of your predecessors, none, have positive ticket growth for their reign in terms of market to market or overall. And you now have to contend with the residencies. It doesn't matter that we don't have the ratings picture as a whole, or some of the viewership trends that we see, like we see with Netflix, are changing. It doesn't matter that you're going to be the most micro-analysed champion ever, and every outlet is going to go after you, not just the CM Punk folks or the WWE outlets, but people that were defended every other reign in this company, and conveniently ignored numbers, to be honest, when they just didn't want to hear them. None of this matters, because you know what? You're going to have good numbers, you're going to have bad numbers. That's the thing about being the men's AEW World Champion, and every time you've got to get up, do it again tomorrow, and get the fuck on with it. That's it.
I mean, that says it all, basically. I don't think there's any way to tap that. It's the level of scrutiny is ridiculous, and some of the numbers are better than people even want to acknowledge, but what are you going to do?
I just thought it was fun to put them all together, and yeah. Sorry.
I don't see why you need to apologize. I think the one that shouldn't go underlooked is that, yes, they are in a residency, but that get-in price for Wednesday's Dynamite was fucking insane. What was it, like $300?
Yeah, we went to 234 at the lowest fund you could find without fees on the morning, and it never got below 190, which is crazy. Like, for the week of the show, you know, the one everyone quotes, which is all out 2021, was already down at $110 2 days before. So it's 1,100 people, but they created a demand that far outstripped what the venue holds for the first time in Dynamite history.
Yes.
And if you're going to do things like this, and we'll get into the residency questions now, that's exactly what you want. And look, you can look at why did they do that match there, and I think there's numerous points, because you don't want to do that in Cleveland, in Ohio, and you don't want to do it in Cincinnati, because you want the right response for your babyface champion. And you can't do it in Glasgow because you're too close then to Forbidden Door. So you have this limited window where you've got to decide. And maybe you could have done it in Virginia on Collision, but you want to put this thing on Dynamite because you know that you're trying to extend this story to cover for the fact that you've got other things kind of building or missing. So there wasn't really a window to put it anywhere else, but you're also trying to create this thing of exclusivity, right? So you put this on there. So these smaller shows, you want a ticket, you want to see these things, they're going to do big things in there. You have that expectation now that actually if we go to one of these shows, there could be a world title match on there. And we need to get the women's world title match, world title more involved as well, because there actually hasn't been a women's world title defense all year on Dynamite or Collision outside of Grand Slam in Australia. So nothing domestic. So you need to have that expectation, and that helps with your live ticket sales then, because if you have this exclusivity, and you have to market this, you have to say, you know, like that get-in price should have been everywhere, right? They should have been pushing that. This is a sold-out show with an insane price. The only way you can be able to get your tickets early for the next one. They didn't. They actually didn't do a great job of that. But they need to, because you're trying to push, like, if you're going to run these residency shows and you're going to run them in your bigger cities where you're going to lose your bigger gates and bigger arenas, right? Because... and it's like cat and mouse, isn't it? Because you can't do these sort of shows in small markets, right? Week after week after week. You can't do 6 shows in a small market. No. But you're also giving up your large house in an arena by running these things here. So you've got to make it so they feel exclusive, like they feel part of something, like you've got to be there. And putting a match like this does that, but then you've also got to promote the hell out of that. The same way, like, you know, they should look at what Pro Wrestling Noah are doing with the Korakuen Hall shows. You know, these shows are 1,500. People are treating them like they're selling out 10,000 buildings because they're selling out a month in advance. They feel big, and you got to look at that. Right. You can look at what TNA did with the pay-per-view that they've just run in New York and how they're marketing that. And it doesn't matter if they go back to 400, 500, 800 houses. Like, people don't know it because they see, like, this is what this is. So you have to market that differently. And I think about, like, the way that music artists kind of market their Las Vegas residencies. And it's like, it's a thing to go and see someone in Vegas, right? It can be like an exclusive ticket. Or when, like, I don't know, I was picking... well, no, I like Bruce Springsteen. Like Springsteen on Broadway, that was like a big thing. You wanted to go to those shows, and they weren't actually that expensive. Right. But it was like, it was a thing to get a ticket. It felt like you got something special. And that's the kind of feeling you've got to tap into when you're doing this, especially when you're putting Dynamite in these things. So you're putting your flagship brand, and you have to battle the perception war of putting that TV brand in there. I don't think it's the same with Collision. Collision doesn't carry the same weight. We know that. But it's different when you put Dynamite in there, and I need to look at that and how you market that, because if you want it to be like a Korakuen Hall and you want it to feel like it's special, and do you remember that match at the Aragon Ballroom? Next time I go, we've got to go early. We need to do everything we can to be there, but you can only do that if you create that perception for yourself and you really push it.
Right. I think they... You know, I know Dave was convinced they weren't going to be able to do anything. They weren't going to be able to sell Philadelphia. I feel like those ticket early numbers are in pretty good shape. I feel like they could still push hard the exclusivity of, like, this is a small room, this is big, you know, this is a special thing. And I think they're not doing it to the degree they could. But I think, I don't think the residencies have hurt them to the degree that people think they have. I think there's this weird perception issue sometimes where people are like, AEW is in a small venue, it looks terrible. I don't think it does. I think it's cool. I think they figured out the space. They used the space in a cool way. Like, the shows looked different. They felt different. I don't know. I kind of enjoyed it, but I appreciate that not everyone's going to feel the same way that I do.
So we got a couple of questions on this, and we can kind of carry on with that from there. So Slashed on our Discord asked a question: what are the benefits and drawbacks of these multi-week shows in the same venue? And how do you say this? How do you say it?
Oh, I've been saying Take Z.
Take Z? Okay, let's do that. Cool.
We've butchered it, but you know who we appreciate.
You can correct us and we'll get it right the next time, I promise.
Please do.
Please. How beneficial would the rumoured Wednesday-Thursday schedule be compared to Wednesday-Saturday for behind-the-scenes stuff like production? And we've seen quite a lot of those on this run. So for me, you know, we've talked about how you can attempt to make that create that kind of demand, and I think that's kind of important if you're going to run these things. There's also a huge cost benefit because they are basically loading in, and then you leave everything there, and then you load out. So you are saving an absolute fortune, especially in the current climate.
That's the most expensive part of everything, is the load in and load out, because the crew requirements, everything else, it costs a lot of money to do that. So dropping the stuff in one spot and leaving it there for a couple of weeks is going to save you a shit ton of money.
Yeah, and not just that, it's so much easier on your staff as well. And everything else that comes involved with that, and then also on the wrestlers. So you've got, you know, one determined location you're traveling to. They're picking quite central locations, you know, or easier access. So, you know, Philadelphia, you know, Dallas, Arlington area, Dallas Metroplex area. Someone will get upset if I just say Dallas, won't they? But yeah, Arlington, the Dallas Metroplex area, and then you know, it's in Chicago. So they're picking things that are accessible for travel as well. For their talent and for their staff too. So there is an element to that where it's beneficial from a cost perspective. I do think you have to fight a perception war, and I think there's a question that I've seen raised a couple of times about what does it do to ratings, but I think that's where you have to battle the perception in order to do that. But there is a question, I think, around one demo in particular in the smaller buildings, and it is the older male demo, 35 to 49. Because we've seen a couple of shows in smaller building now, especially world title matches. Because I was looking at the Kenny Omega return match and the Jon Moxley title defense back in January in Cincinnati. And it's interesting that you see the same drop or similar drop in male 35 to 49 as you see for this one in this venue. And maybe that's something to keep an eye on in Philadelphia, whether that's something that actually reflects that we see big matches and that demo is not as much into them in these sort of buildings, if that's like becomes a trend, whether that's the one that thinks more about the perception of, oh, they must be in a big building, you know, for me to think they're successful, and they buy into the kind of WWE rhetoric on that. So that's kind of an interesting to follow. It's just kind of like a starting bit at the moment, but it's not really a trend. But I think when you look at the way that other industries are changing, and we look at music, and even like you look at what UFC do like that, and you look at how much they've expanded their pay-per-view calendar, then I can really see why you would look at doing this. I know Tony Khan was even speaking when he was his latest interview with Case Lowe around, you know, they've looked at potentially having a permanent base for TV tapings and then having the pay-per-views as the bigger shows. And it looks like, you know, is that something potentially they look to? And especially with the addition of Collision, because I don't think they've ever solved the Collision problem in terms of the effect it has on live events, because it is a weaker product. So for me, I think it would be beneficial if you did the residencies and you concentrated them on Collision. I'm not sold on them on Dynamite. Every now and again, having them in a smaller venue, you know, and making that exclusive, great. But when you do the repeated weeks and that, and it's a flagship, I'm not sold on it. And I do think that they don't do enough to counter their perception issues to make it worthwhile in that aspect.
I agree with that. I think the perception thing is the biggest hit for them, because you do have a lot of people being like, it doesn't look good. And like, they're not pushing back on that in a way that I think could make it seem cooler.
But it's, yeah, it's an interesting one. I think we'll learn a little bit more from what they do in Philadelphia and how that has an effect. And then if they plan any more into the fall, because it's interesting that they've done this now, which is traditionally like a bigger ticket period for them, and not in the winter where they've traditionally struggled. So it's almost, and maybe that's building availability. I'm not sure. You know, especially concert arenas become far more valuable in the winter when, you know, there's not the outdoor festivals taking up much of music's kind of calendar, or the big stadium shows or that sort of thing, or amphitheaters. You know, so maybe it's venue availability that drives that. But it feels to me like it's a weird time of year to do it. So maybe you experiment with that in the winter and you come up with that. But I do think it's experimentation, and I think everyone's very quick to jump on it. But we don't know, and we don't know how kind of things are going to change in terms of the industry. You know, they've changed to their bigger pay-per-view model. They obviously see some success in that. They're able to maintain strong crowds despite going from 4 to 9 pay-per-views over the last few years. So maybe that becomes the focal point of their live event business, because we know live event is much less important than it was 5-6 years ago. In terms of Wednesday, Thursday schedule, it's a huge benefit for staff, because there are a lot of people that will work in kind of both sets of tapings. You know, they'll fly in for a Tuesday night for a Wednesday, fly back out on a Thursday, or fly to the next town. So it's a huge drain on your life, essentially. So for work-life balance, it would make a massive, massive difference. And it was one of the key kind of components that was so exciting for people to join this company at the very start, that it was only kind of once a week in the schedule, compared to the everlasting WWE schedule with the free house shows at the weekend.
Yep.
Would it change? I do think they need to set a day for Collision, because all this moving around, I think, is hurting them. Going Thursday, Saturday, Thursday, Saturday. But would it change who you saw on these shows? I'm not so sure. So the way I look at it, there's barriers that have nothing to do with it being Wednesday, Saturday. So they will always prioritise Dynamite. And we've seen this. So every time they get small roster, like we've had the last few weeks, they will prioritise Dynamite, and Collision will drop in terms of name quality and value. Fine. That's what they do. But also, there's so many people with like limited dates or other considerations in contract that I don't think it would change things dramatically, unless, you know, they spend the money, people work. But it's like you will have to make those considerations as well. And I think that's why, even when we've seen a lot of these Wednesday and Thursday tapings, we've not seen a lot of the names working Dynamite, them working Collision.
Right.
That's it. You're like, okay, yep, fine.
I thought you might keep going.
Boring logistical questions, and you just go like,
Please, I love a good logistical question. I also think it's worthwhile pointing out that they did one of these residencies right after All In, which All In was one of their biggest shows, where they were like asking a lot of their team. And so by doing the show in this moment, it does kind of, like you said, give, you know, even staff members who are working multiple shows the opportunities for vacations or some time off, because they don't have to worry about that travel and the load in and all that stuff, which I think can be important after you're coming off a big show like that, where everybody has really got to, you know, put the effort in. This is not again, this is not a business that has down periods or, these people are working 52 weeks a year, right? Like they're putting on a show every week regardless. We're not having any reruns, and that takes a toll, right? Creatively, I think it takes a toll physically on people, and I'm not talking about the wrestlers necessarily as much as I'm talking about the people backstage. So yeah, I mean, when was the last time Tony Schiavone took a week off?
Yeah, and
God,
and I think it's hard because I think that coming at a big show, people expect them to do like some big things, right? Would we be having the same conversations if they'd done 2-3 weeks after in big arenas, right? If they'd gone to the Toyota Arena in Ontario, California after this,
right,
and the first crowd had been like 5,000-6,000 hot,
right.
would we be having the same conversations? No, we wouldn't. We wouldn't. But it's because
No.
they went straight from that to there that people were kind of questioning it more. But that has its benefits and it's kind of callbacks. But callbacks. And,
it's also worthwhile pointing out where the freaking ticket sales were at the time that they made these decisions, the all-in ticket sales, where those were at the time that they announced this residency. Like they were in a very different position at the time that this stuff was announced. And this is one of the challenges of having to book these types of shows and the locations for these shows so far in advance.
Yeah, and when you look at New Japan, it's a similar thing that they're seeing there because they booked the current G1 tour, about a year ago, where they had a Naito. And they had the prospect of the Goto Toto one, and they thought he might be able to be, use enough that he could be in there as well, and he's not. And we've seen a bigger difference with the loss of Naito than we saw with Okada and Ospreay or people like that, and it's really impacted them pretty much straight away. So you book all these venues, and you already have the issue that you don't have venues available for you because your Aichi Prefectural Gymnasium is now closed. You've lost the venues in Osaka which are on being kind of redeveloped in this summer, and you've got some weird things where you've got things like Hiroshima and in the weekend, and things like Osaka where you want the big weekend numbers that are going to hold up your averages for this tour are in the week. And it's the same with the way they booked Otter on a Friday night, which had no one in it. But if they booked that as Korakuen and then booked Otter on a Saturday and Sunday, it may have looked a lot better. So you have these decisions that are made primarily under different circumstances, and exactly the same with these residencies. They weren't in a very strong place at all in the spring in terms of looking at where they're going to get to, and you're also looking at the changing marketplace and trying to reflect on that. So it's all experimentation. I think it'll take probably 6 to 12 months to kind of figure itself out, and when we'll kind of see where they are. But that's where this is, and it is different. I think people are having issues kind of acclimatizing to them trying something different.
Yeah.
Maybe it's different when they moved to the small buildings because that was like an expectation. And it's like, okay, does this work? Does it not? And we'll come back to it, I'm sure, in 6 to 12 months and discuss it again. And we'll probably know the answer from there.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else? I think
no.
That's pretty much it. We've been very number heavy this week.
Yeah, but, we like a good number.
Huh?
Number heavy and WWE heavy.
True. Yeah, but that was funny, so we'll let that one off.
It was really fucking funny. It was fucking so bad. Sometimes I just like to watch WWE and be reassured that it is shit, and it was shit, it's still shit, and I'm not missing anything on a regular basis.
Well, that's good. Okay. Right, so that will be all for today then. This has been the Trish and Sarah Wrestling Podcast, produced by the wonderful Leah of Tunnel Talk. Tunnel Talk every weekend on a Sunday. Catch up with all the best on AEW storylines, characters, and
hot buds.
What's making them happy. That's the most important bit to me. I enjoy what's making them happy.
It's the biggest and most important. I mean, if that went away, what could you even do? When it goes, they should do that year round, I think. We should get a "What's Making You Happy" segment every year.
We've got to, we've got to convert them to some other kind of maybe CMLL, because then we can have you can move from promotion to promotion, and they can just pick through them. We can do the fashion shows at New Japan. That could be something else that we can get them into, and they can pick from there. We've got to we're going to diversify Tunnel Talk's content here. This is the aim for this podcast.
Yes, I agree, and I think that the Tunnel Talk ladies should, in fact, watch more wrestling. It should pretty much be all that they do, all the time. So yes, our podcast is hosted on the Social Suplex Network, where you can listen to other fabulous programs like Tunnel Talk, like Keeping It Strong Style, Imp's WWE Adventure, One Nation Radio, Wrestling Art with Chris Things, all of these fabulous shows and more available to you at the Social Suplex Network. We also have the Social Suplex newsletter, as discussed, which is on the socialsuplex.com. Tremendous features, as we talked about. There will be a new newsletter out before this episode airs, which we strongly recommend you take a look. There are a lot of people that work very hard on this newsletter, and I don't think that you are going to get the in-depth coverage of the different promotions worldwide that you get from this newsletter anywhere else. There's just nobody else doing it like this. It's totally free to you. There's no cost. Highly recommend that you check it out when you get a chance. We will be back in another 2 weeks to discuss various eccentrical topics.
We'll be at Triple Mania.
Triple Mania. 3 manias, folks. Almost more mania than you can handle. What is it? Not Maximum Carnage, Maximum Mania.
Oh, no.
Which is possibly a good subtitle for this episode of this podcast. Maximum Insanity. All right. Until next time in 2 weeks, I've been Sarah.
I've been Trish.
And this has been the Trish and Sarah Wrestling Podcast.
If you're a podcast host, listen up, this one's for you. My name is Allie Jackson. I'm the host of Finding Mr. Height, a dating and relationship podcast that I've been doing for 4 years now, sharing my positive and practical approach to dating that's built on my own life experience. And I wanted to share another experience that I've had, my secret behind monetizing my show. It's called Red Circle, and I was just telling my colleague about how much I love their platform. With Red Circle, not only am I getting a seamless hosting experience, but I also love the support I receive in ad sales. It's not just typical ad sales either. It's targeted opportunities based on my show and my life. And the platform is super simple. You just set your preferences and Red Circle matches you with sponsors that align with your show. You can vet every opportunity and their platform gives you great analytics. More recently too, my Red Circle team has brought me opportunities outside of my podcast on social media to really augment the podcast partnerships, bring them full circle. I just can't recommend them enough. If you want to give it a try, go to redcircle.com to get your free trial. That's redcircle.com for a free trial.